Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I am your host, Sal, with my co host, Monty. What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? Sorry, folks, for the late start. We both had some stuff for this, but we won't be able to get a show to you guys later this week. So we wanted to jump on here, give you guys some talking points for what to look for at this upcoming combine, and of course, give you two more people to watch. But yeah, how you doing, Sal?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We just had our last episode just a few days ago. We're doing one little closer to the early part of the week this week just because we have some work stuff planned for both of us later in the week. But I think it worked out well. We're going to do some preview of the combine, which kicks off shortly. The interviews are all starting, and I know tomorrow Joe Shane is scheduled to go to the podium at about 10:20. Um, so we're gonna hear what he has to say. I'm sure he's gonna be very illuminating. Hey
Yeah.
Joe, who's your quarterback? Oh, we're looking at everything. Me and Dave's, we have a process we follow. We trust our process. We'll find a quarterback. Should be fun. Um, anyway, so as we go into the combine, we're gonna do a special episode. We did this last year too. I think it was well received, Monty, where we did the combine preview. So we are gonna
Mhm.
get into a whole combine preview position by position and go over the data over the testing results and traits that tend to matter and predict success by position. And this is based on things like wins above replacement, stat that's familiar for those of you who follow baseball. PFF has been developing their own stat for it. Um, by and large, a lot of stuff just kind of adds up to these are the traits that the guys who end up being the best players in the NFL do well in by position group. So it's worth looking at. Obviously, there's more to it than just testing, but just to get a glance and stuff to pay attention to as the combine rolls through. So we'll go position by position at that, and we're also going to go through some players with a special episode planned on that. We're going to go through some guys to watch by position group as we go
Mhm.
through them, but we're going to get to that at the end. Um, we're about to go through two good players here. Last week we did two D linemen who I think were good. We did an edge rusher, and what was the other one we did? I think we did two edge rushers, right?
Yeah, we had edge rushers
Yeah,
last week.
right.
Yep, we were gonna do a D lineman, but we didn't get to it, and then we found out there's no all 22 on Ty Roberts. So apologies, Rob. We will get to him when we get all 22 available.
Yeah, we have two more edge rushers today, and if you think it's getting annoying with the edge rushers, those of you who follow me on Twitter, those of you who hear me yap on Spaces know I have a very consistent theme of what I want to see this team become. I want the defense to get stronger. I have my theory of the cases. I want us to get bigger and stronger and meaner up front. And I think our D line needs some revamping. I don't think just having two speed edge rushers and Dexter Lawrence is a great strategy. Luckily, this particular draft class offers a lot of guys who present themselves as solutions if you're trying to solve that problem. So we want to go through a couple more guys that I think would be interesting and intriguing edge rush options. So there's really not much else going on Giants world other than this whole Matt Stafford stuff going on, Monty. And I don't want to get too much into it, but
Yeah.
Matt Stafford watch is on. We'll see how real it is. We should probably find out more this week. But the latest I'm hearing, thankfully, is that I think insiders feel like this deal with the Rams is probably going to get done. That they'll probably
Mhm.
find a way to find a solution and he will not be traded, which I think is the best thing for all parties, personally.
Yep. And I'm hoping because we've gone into this a lot why we don't think it makes sense. So I hope the Rams just get something done. And I do think it makes sense for the Rams because the Rams are so close to the Super Bowl. Why would they be moving on unless they think this guy's totally cooked? Like if they believe in this guy, it's just money. You have a chance to make a Super Bowl run, make the run. But for us, this move isn't really for a Super Bowl, so I haven't really been for it. I will say one thing about this too. Shout out to Weiss over at NYG Daily. I jumped on to his tweet and confirmed that I heard the same thing as him, but he said that the Giants were looking into Matthew Stafford and trying to trade for him at the trade deadline. I jumped on and said I heard the exact same thing. I know a lot of people were clowning on him and saying that was fake. And Giants reporter Jordan Run On went and confirmed it today. So some
Hmm.
confirmation for I told you guys on the pod is that as well. So Giant very interesting. The Giants were looking into Matthew Stafford at the trade deadline.
Very Giants Joe Shane has thing to do with 2-6, isn't it?
Yeah.
So makes sense. Hey, don't
Hmm.
trade your expiring contracts. Go get Matt Stafford. Whatever. We'll see how it goes. I'll believe it's over when it's over, but hopefully the Giants will reorient themselves and focus on what they, in my opinion, should be orienting themselves on, which is you're at the third overall pick. There are two good quarterbacks in this class. Figure out a way to get one of them and build your roster. So we'll see how it goes. Oh, and the last point I'll make before we go into these edge rushers is, um, I do want to address the faux outrage about Shador Sanders not throwing. Look, folks, I get it. He is a polarizing prospect for many people, but let's be honest, him throwing was not going to convince anybody who's a doubter about him that he is somehow worthy of taking. Um, if you don't like him, you don't like him, and that's okay. You don't have to like it, the prospect. But I don't think anybody was going to have their mind changed by him throwing the football at the combine. I think anybody who believes that is really being a little bit naive. I've never
Mhm.
seen a prospect change anybody's mind meaningfully at the top of the draft like that. And you can say, oh, you want,
Not in
well,
a
I think he's a
positive
second,
way.
right? No, and you can say, well, I think he's a second round talent. Well, yeah, I mean, if you feel that way, you're not going to change your mind based on
Mhm.
the combine, and
Nor
neither
should
will
you.
an NFL team. No, I mean, the only argument for throwing at the combine really is that the NFL ball is a little bit different than the college football. It's a little bit larger. So throwing in NFL football is a little bit different. However, they're gonna throw an NFL football at their pro days, and
Mhm.
every team will have their scouts at these pro days, watching them throw to their own receivers, and they'll have private workouts. Like the top quarterbacks will have private workouts with the top teams that are in the hunt. So if you're worried about the Giants not getting an adequate look at a player, I think you should probably rest assured they'll get a clean look. I'm not too worried about it. Remember last year, the top three quarterbacks did not throw at the
Yep.
combine at all. They didn't do anything. They didn't test, they didn't do a damn thing. They showed up, they did interviews, they did medicals, they went home. Didn't affect anything. I think that is going to be more of a thing you see in the era of NIL. They've made their money and they are basically banking their stock already. So it is what it is. I think people need to get used to it. It is an opportunity, I will say, for guys who are not viewed as first round players to showcase,
Mhm.
right, to raise their stock, and I think that's a good thing. I think not everybody is like a slam dunk. Some people, the people who have to like convince others that they're going to be a first rounder, and it's a choice that they make. But I do think it helps some guys. But I wouldn't lose sleep over what quarterbacks do at the combine. You have, many, many throws, thousands of throws to watch if you really are that worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at CJ Stroud a few years ago. He had probably the best throwing performance I've ever seen at the combine, and that was preceded by CJ Stroud being shit on for the next 2 months. Despite that, um,
And he went
yeah,
exactly where everybody thought he would go, second
yep,
overall. He went
yep.
exactly in
And
the
Bryce
same
Young
spot.
didn't throw and it didn't jump him.
What? And he went first overall.
Yep.
And whether he threw or not would not have changed the fact that he was going to go first overall, and it's not going to change the trajectory of his career.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, I was talking to some people like, like our guy Alex. He's not a big Shador fan. We had and we've gone back and forth before, but I thought he had a good point when we were discussing it was is essentially it's really just you have to throw at some point. And the fact that he doesn't throw at the combine means there's no second chances at the pro day. If he has a bad pro day, that's his throwing on paper. That's what it is. And the combine gives you two shots at that. And he's deferring, and that's okay. And if he has a bad day at the pro day, there will be no second chances, and that's all right too. It's not that this was ever going to help him and make him jump. It's just that everybody has to throw at some point. It's a necessary evil kind of with these quarterbacks, and you're really only gonna hurt yourself, but you got to do it. And he's choosing to do it at the pro day. And one thing I'll also mention with that too is something I threw out there as well. It honestly made more sense the more I thought about it. I think of how um how Shador and Dion have approached this whole draft situation where, you know, Shador played in the bowl game, despite really the first time I've ever seen a quarterback play a full bowl game, where he
In
was
a non-championship, playoff theory. Yeah,
in a
I
in
agree.
a long time, and he's doing the draft at Boulder. To me, part of this is, this is about Colorado. This is our team. We're gonna go to the combine. We're gonna do our interviews. But if you want to see this, come to Boulder. Come look at all our players, and feel like what's going on with this program here. I
I
feel
mean,
like this is a little bit of that too.
Will Shepard got snubbed from the combine.
Hmm.
I mean, there's more to the story than I think sometimes people realize, and you know, it is what it is. But I think he's going to want to try to boost up his teammates. So anyway, he'll throw it his pro day, and he'll have to throw it as private workouts, and that'll be that. That shouldn't affect
Hmm.
any evaluation for meaningful purposes. And I don't think these things really are predictive of success in the NFL. There's a lot more that goes into that, but we shall see. Um, Speaking of Alex, Alex is one of the guys who said, "Hey, why don't you watch one of these guys we're going to go over today?" So shout out to Alex on that.
Hmm.
And I really enjoyed watching this guy's tape. But uh, do you want to do his first, or do you want to do the other guy?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just do his first. You're speaking of Elijah Roberts, right?
Yep.
All right.
So yeah, let's pull up his stuff real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So the two edge rushers we're going to go over today. The first is Elijah Roberts from SMU. He is kind of a monster, and he's my prototype of edge rushers
Mm-hmm.
that I am looking for. I'm just pulling up all his data as we talk here. Um, I got to tell you, man, I watched his film and I really enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it.
He grew on me the more I watched him. At first I wasn't overly excited about it, and then honestly, I said this before a show. Part of it was you're about to go into it, but this guy's I think was 6'4", 290 at
Six,
the
s-
at
s- 6'4", 295 was his
but
listed
or at
play.
his
Yeah.
as senior bowl though. I think he was
Yeah, he
290.
came in a little bit later. Yeah.
But like that's crazy for
And
like
he's built like a freaking Mack truck too. He doesn't carry it like a fat 290. The guy is
no,
lean.
I was thinking like 260 or something like that.
No, he's a big dude.
Yeah.
So Elijah Roberts, this is a guy who has gotten progressively better over his years at SMU. I'm going to go through some of his production stats because there's something to be said about this stuff. So the last 2 years, he's put up kind of video game numbers over there. This year, 590 defensive snaps in 13 games. He has had 369 in pass rush, 213 in run defense, 8 sacks, 7 hits, 45 hurries, and 2 batted balls for a grand total of 62 pressures. That's just disgusting. 62 pressures in 13 games with that many sacks and quarterback hits. Last year, he had 13 sacks, 11 hits, 47 hurries, and a batted ball. So he had even more and 50 more snaps. This guy is very productive. Largely, he lines up outside the tackle. He lines up as a true edge rusher or over tackle, but you see him sometimes do, interesting things. Like I saw plenty of snaps of him. I think they're actually underestimating, his B gap snaps. I saw at least 4 or 5 B gap snaps in one game where they just move him inside. So he's got the size and the flexibility to line up both as a true edge rusher with like stand up, all the way to a hand in the dirt interior defensive lineman to mix and match. They use him a lot in stunts and twists, which I liked watching at
Hmm.
SMU, which is something that the Giants could use with their current defensive scheme. Um, what is there to like about this guy other than what I'm just mentioning? So, like I said, he moves around the line. Um, he is strong, dude. Like that's what stands out. You watch him; he's a bull.
Hmm.
Um, he's a pass rushing bull, and he's all about getting his hands on you and driving you back. And that's what I'm looking for right now in an edge rusher. That's the prototype I'm looking for the Giants as a defensive lineman slash edge. Solid bull rush. He gets a lot of pressure with just leg drive, hands in the chest, driving you backwards. There's some reps against left tackles that he just makes them look, he tosses them like they're running backs trying to block him. He's consistently double teamed and he does not get pushed off the double team. So he's a problem on the defensive line. Um, I think he's really solid in the run game. When he's setting the edge at tackle, he's very good at actually setting the edge, holding the line, watching the quarterback with his eyes, watching the running back with his eyes, and making sure he doesn't give up that edge. The
Hmm.
one the one caveat, and I mentioned to you before we started, was there were some snaps where, especially when he had twists and stunts and things like that, where he was quick to lose his gap integrity.
Okay.
He's like that's just sometimes being overly aggressive. And I saw there were plays where, like in the Stanford game, I saw quarterbacks get away from him. The quarterback got away from him because he would lose integrity of his gap. And I mean, that's just something that I think can be coached. But overall, just a physical dude. Doesn't have a ton of pass rush moves. It's mostly just bull rush, and and just physicality with his hands. But I think that that's enough for him. He wins with it. I don't think he's a super explosive guy. I don't think there's anything elite about his speed, but he's got a crazy hot motor, and he doesn't give up on plays. I don't think that there's a lot not to like about him. I don't think there's a lot to learn about him. I don't think there's a lot to tap into. I think either what you see is what you get kind of player, but what you're getting is a gigantic human being who can play edge, move around the D line, and snap after snap will drive offensive linemen back into the lap of the quarterback and be a solid run defender and generate a ton of pressures just with sheer force. That's what I saw. What did you see?
Yeah, man, I saw a lot of the same things as you. Um, I think the main thing you brought up right away is I saw a really versatile player. I don't necessarily think these snap alignments that we were here.
I don't think they're accurate.
Yeah, it doesn't line up what I saw, man. Maybe some of the they're calling some of the B gaps like over tackle because he sat between like the tackle and the guard or something like that. But
Only because the tackle would have to help on the double team on the inside.
yeah, but like he's always a stand-up guy for the most part. He did, he gets to hand his dirt occasionally, but even when he's like inside the B gap, he's typically standing up. But like SMU did a lot of like it almost was like a NASCAR type stuff with him that they saw. He reminded me watching him a little bit of like watching Justin Tuck back in the day and how they
Yeah.
moved him around and his ability to kind of do it all and just being a solid player, be a really good run defender. I don't think that's the worst comp for him. Obviously, he's a lot bigger than Tuck. They're not the same player, but there's some similarities there.
And I don't think he's as explosive as Tuck was
No,
off
I
the
agree.
snap.
I agree with that too. But I thought I thought he really active hands, really strong hands. I did see he had a decent swim and rip. I will say that he didn't have like necessarily anything um complex about his pass rush plan, but he could make moves. One thing I noted on him is like given his athleticism, and he's not like look, he's a really strong dude, but this isn't like an absolute like elite strength guy. So with like average athleticism and just very good strength, you never really see this guy absolutely just blow up a play really in the pass rush. Like it's not like we talked about like Princely last week. Princely
Mhm.
quick, quick pressures. And when he got there, it was over. It was done. With him, he really has to work to get the pressures, but I saw the pressures much more consistently than I saw with a guy like Princely. I felt like he was affecting the quarterback on a down by down basis more
Agreed.
often when I saw him. So like it was different and he could collapse a pocket and whatnot. I thought he was a really good run defender. I saw a little bit of what you're talking about with like some of the stunts and twists, but as far as like gap integrity, and you mentioned like setting the edge, I thought he did a really good job of like he could make a play on a guy kind of running through that like C gap potentially, but I felt like he knew the best thing to do was to not risk the running back like cutting back and getting around him by him trying to close that too quickly. I thought he was very like cautious in a good way. Making sure he held the edge, so they don't really take advantage and get outside. But the main issue I had with him in the run defense, because I think he's a really good run defender. I mean, you look at his stats, like 8.5 run stop rate, really good. He's not the best tackler in the world, and that showed up on tape at times. And you look at his PFF numbers on that. I think he had something about a 22% missed tackle rate, which is not good at all. Let's see. And the other thing I noticed, I don't know if you saw this, he was a really vocal player. I saw him
Hmm.
constantly standing up, talking to his players on his defense, calling them the D line, calling out things like, that's what you good. That's a good thing to see. Good thing to see a leader, a guy who probably is a very, high IQ football player to be able to recognize certain tendencies on the offense pre-snap and, try to help those players around him. He was definitely a leader on that defense. Again, as far as the cons, not the most athletic guy. Definitely doesn't have an elite first step by any means. Um, he is not like a high upside pass rusher, but I think he is a good, well-rounded football player. I really like Elijah Roberts, man. He, a guy Landon Jackson, who we reviewed last week, who I really loved him in the run defense, and I think Landon Jackson's a better run defender than Elijah Roberts. I really like Elijah Roberts' upside in the pass rush more than I liked Landon Jackson. I think projects as an all around player a little bit better to me, and that size is also so intriguing to me because although he's not the most athletic person in the world, I think he's very athletic for his size. For a guy who's 290 pounds, he moves like a linebacker. So, compared to these 250-pound edges, he doesn't look elite, but given his size, he really is a pretty special athlete.
Yeah, he measured it. I was checking. He measured in just over 6'3", 290 at the Senior
Yep.
Bowl. So,
Yeah, I did catch that
now
out.
I will say that he has longer arms. I don't know if they did arm length measurement on him there. They might have. Um,
Check.
they usually do, but he plays like he has a good arm length. I didn't see a problem with that. Like I mentioned, he had some batted balls, so he plays taller than I think 6'3", 6'4". He plays like just watching him, I thought he was like 6'5", 290. 6'5", 275 actually, because he's so muscular.
Yeah,
Something like that.
I thought he was
But
like a 260, 270 guy.
he's a big dude.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like we can get into the grading of this guy, but I think we both like what we saw as a fit here. So, do you want to pull up the grades?
Yeah, let me pull him up. So let's see.
34-inch arms at the shrine. That's not bad.
Wow,
I mean,
that's
yeah,
really good.
yeah.
But
So I mean, again, like that's like you don't see it. You don't see his height be an issue on tape. Um, all right. So explosiveness and quickness. We had identical grades across the board here. Explosiveness and quickness, 3. Average, not bad, not great. I would agree, I don't think there's much else to say there. His strength is his upper body strength and hands. We both give him a 4. I think he's above average at the NFL level with his upper body strength and his hands. His bend is a 2. You don't see bend from him.
it's not.
He's
He's not supposed to bend at 290.
no,
That's not fair to ask them.
he's like like an ironing board coming at you,
Yeah.
like a really strong ironing board. Um, Pressures, he gets a ton. I mentioned like over 60 pressures a year, so he gets a 4 there. He's well above average. He's a 4 in edge setting, very good as an edge setter,
Mhm.
and a good force there.
They don't move
Um,
him.
yeah, you don't move the guy at all. Drop zone, he's a 2. I think he doesn't. We don't see much of that, if
Yeah.
any. Durability, he was solid. He was a 4. Giants grade, I think he's easily a 4 here, and a Goon grade of 3. So we have an overall grade of 316, above average NFL player, average to above average. And I think that's good value where I think he's projected to go right now. I was checking various sites, and they all have him projected as somewhere between like a third and fourth rounder. Um, if this guy, I don't know if he's available that late, but I would even consider taking him at pick 65, depending on how
Mhm.
our first 2 picks go. I think he's a quality edge setter. I think he's a starter. I don't think he's a rotational player. I think for my vision of the team, this guy's a starter. Like you as a defensive end, he
Agree.
really he really helps our defense get stronger against the run, set the edge, and really create a lot of problems. Now, the other thing I mentioned a few times now is he eats double teams, like
Mhm.
consistently. He had to be double teamed. Now that could just be
Yeah, they
because he
double
was
teamed a lot.
yeah, and it didn't bother him. Now that could be just because, he was the only real force on that line that other teams had to worry about it to that degree. But again, when you have Dexter Lawrence on your team, if this guy is, either a 3-4 defensive end, however they want to use him, he's going to be tough to double team. And without a double team, he really is a knockback edge rusher where he's driving and collapsing the pocket. So he has a chance to be a lot better and more impactful with a guy like Dexter Lawrence. That's true for everybody, but specifically for a guy who wins with power on one-on-one. So I really like his fit here.
What one thing I forgot to mention too, as far as moving him around a lot, we mentioned that he gets moved inside, moved outside a lot. He also, got moved to the strong side of the field a lot of times. They would
Mhm.
move him to the wide side to, help stop against the runs and things like that. He was constantly switching between going off the right tackle and the left tackle, and I think that is. And that's also why he ended up getting double teamed a lot because he
Yep.
ends up on the side of where the tight end is a lot, and the tight end is always staying in to help this guy. He is this is a really good player, like he said, And to be honest with you, like I was very much against the value of like Landon Jackson. We're talking about him as a second round. When we're talking about Elijah Roberts in the third round, I think that's a much better value.
Hmm. I mean, I would be, you know how I feel. I think there are strategies in which you can go get a guy like Jackson. I think it would involve a trade down where you acquire assets, and I think that's
Hmm.
valuable. But yeah, I mean, if you go elsewhere in the second round, or you don't have your second round pick because you made a trade, whatever it may be, a guy like Roberts here later, either in the third or the fourth round, is high value for this organization. I think he carries more value for the Giants than for a lot of other teams. So
Hmm.
really excellent find there. Thank you, Alex. Um, but I really enjoyed it. And thank you, DKIT, big SMU fan in here.
Hmm.
Um, but I really liked what I saw.
Yeah,
One to
I
keep an eye
agree.
on.
Yeah, and like I said, guy that I was watching him, he's fine, does everything fine, and then it's just like the more I watch him, he's consistently good. The more I look into him, I see like God, this guy's a giant. I'm just like, oh, you know what? Yeah, he's a giant, that's for sure.
All right, so that's Elijah Roberts. You want to go into the other guy?
Yeah, sure. So, our other guy is somebody that we talked a little bit about last week, and David Roberts, somebody who we drafted in our mock draft, and Sal was a little bit more familiar with than I was, but we haven't done an official breakdown yet. So let's get into him. David Walker, they have him listed at 6'2", 260. If I remember correctly,
Nope.
his senior bowl was much smaller than that, wasn't it?
Just over 6 feet tall. Came in around 267, I think, if I recall.
Yeah, I mean, that's
But I mean,
tough.
but 6 feet tall, 267. That's a stout individual.
Yeah, very much
A
is. The
freaking
the
bowling
other
ball.
issue there was he had just under 32-inch arms, which is
That's correct.
also,
That is a little bit of a red flag when you're talking about playing the edge.
but but let me get in a little bit what I saw there. Um, some things I really liked about this guy. Again, I'm big into the high motor players. This guy was one of those guys that we can talk about, plays with his hair on fire and all like that. He's always trying to get to the football, always trying to make plays. I love to see that. I think he has good pass rush ability. I thought he showed good bend and quickness. Thought he had good hand usage. I thought that he was really good at with his footwork when he was like attacking the quarterback. I thought he could really like fake in, go outside, did a little bit of that to his game. And he had really good functional strength. He could really, you know, push a guy back and get a bull rush. I mean, depending on the guy who's playing, I looked at him a few different games. The competition that Central Arkansas normally played, he just absolutely destroyed those guys. He had those guys getting flying back in the quarterback. I watched him against like a Gray Zabel at North Carolina State. Yeah, he wasn't quite doing that to Gray Zabel, but he still was. He was able to get a little bit of a bull rush collapse the pocket. Um, and also, I thought was interesting to add on to him. He is pretty good in drop zone coverage. He was a guy who they had do it a good bit, and I felt like he was very strong there, especially for an edge rusher. It's funny is part of the reason we drafted this guy last week. We look at all his grades, look at that run defense grade and whatnot, is it run stopper, all that really high, and it's a really thick dude. So I was, all right, this is a guy who can add some size to the line. To me, when I watched him against like North Dakota State, where he had to go against a guy like Ray Zabel specifically, this is really try to kind of use more of a measuring stick on because some of the other games were harder to get a good judgment of where he's going to be in the NFL. I thought he had some real issues in the run game. I thought he had some issues disengaging and block shedding. I thought his arm length really popped as an issue. I didn't. I felt like linemen were able to get inside of him. And that was definitely, I think, part of the reason he had so much issue block shedding. And I felt he had some issues setting the edge. I felt like he could get washed at times, especially by polars and whatnot. So to me, when I watch, I'm interested in what you think on him. But I saw somebody who I see more as a situational pass rusher in the NFL. I was hoping I would see a guy who, with that size could add something as a run stopper, but I did not see that. I saw a guy who was more of a pass rush specialist, but at least right now. What did you see, Sal?
Um, I could see the same stuff you saw. I think I might have a little bit more. I definitely have a little bit more confidence in his ability to play more than just situationally. I think he's a,
Hmm.
you know, I think the big issue is going to be his length. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, he doesn't have the arm length or the height to really be consistently effective. I think at the NFL level, there are not a lot of guys who at that size play edge three downs and find a lot of success, mainly because they become liabilities in the run game. It's harder for them to maintain and hold an edge and and basically disengage when needed to because they get power. They get beat up by powerful tackles. And like you mentioned, Gray's able kind of had his number, right? Gray's able really kind
Hmm.
of bullied him, and that's a little bit of a red flag on his tape. Other than that, I do think he's just an outstanding player overall as a football player. He's strong as hell. I showed you
Hmm.
clips of him where
Yeah.
even when he was a freshman, or he was a whatever, he was a sophomore, he's when he gets his motor going, he can take a tackle and drive him back 10 yards, which is
Hmm.
sheer power. So he's a powerful dude. He just has to hit you with the right angle and the right force, right? For him, it's all about leverage and momentum. If he doesn't get that leverage, I actually, I know there are people who think he's a stand-up linebacker. I don't like him. I thought he was better with his hand in the dirt, honestly, and
Hmm.
in some reps. I mean, I get it. Like as a stand-up rusher, he has the ability to have that quick first step, which he is very explosive, but leverage is sort of his calling card, I think. He's low to the ground and he can generate a lot of power. And he has knockback power with his strength, with leverage. The problem with him again is going to be length, and I think he's going to get swallowed up by certain larger tackles. And I don't think he has the size to flexibly play on the interior at the NFL level. Um, but as a situational pass rusher, I think this guy could be an elite weapon. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that like if he has a little bit of help and he can be a NASCAR package type edge rusher, his first step quickness and his power could be really devastating. So I like him as a player. I just don't see him in the same light as I see guys like Jackson or guys like Roberts. He's just a different prototype. He's a really good football player, but I think the length is going to be the issue. And unfortunately you saw it on tape how it affected him. So well, I love his motor. I agree with everything you said about him. He's powerful, got a great motor. I love guys who play like this. They have a spot on my team. I imagine him going to an NFL team and being initially a situational pass rusher and a special teamer. I can see him being a core special teamer, a guy
Hmm.
who's like a locker room guy. Is he a guy that you take day one or day two? I would say no. I don't think I was an expended day two pick on him. If I can get him on day three, I like him a lot more. So that's kind of where I am with him.
Yeah, I think he a guy he reminded me a little bit of, but worse version. I thought it kind of reminded me a little bit of Josiah Stewart. I thought Josiah Stewart was has much more chops as a pass rusher and not quite the same strength that Walker has, but kind of being shorter guys and some of their strengths and weaknesses. I saw some similarities there.
Yep,
Um, but yeah, he's an interesting guy. D Kit mentioned it. Walker's a violent player, and that's a great way to describe it. He is
he is violent. Yeah,
very violent the way he plays the game.
and
But
guys who play that with that level of motor and that level of violence, they deserve a spot on your 53 man roster.
100%.
And I think whoever takes him is going to enjoy having him because he's the kind of guy, Monty, I can see getting maybe 35% to 40% of the snaps in a game in his rookie year. But he's a guy that I can see having big time plays late in games on
Hmm.
third and long, flying around the edge, knocking guys back, taking down the quarterback, forcing fumbles. He plays that level of football where he's really useful. I mean, if you think about it, teams like the Eagles rotate guys like this, right? They
Yes,
they they
agreed.
collect these types of guys. So where do you get these guys? You kind of get them on day three, and you load them up. Could he be your Jalix Hunt, for example, right? Even though
Hmm.
Jalix Hunt is a more traditional size player, yeah, I think so. And in a slightly different, in a slightly different package size, pause. But like, but that kind of a situational player. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, let's go through the grades. Explosiveness and quickness, we both gave him a four. Really, the first step quickness is elite. I really liked it. Maybe not
Hmm.
elite, but very
Very,
close to it.
yeah, above average for sure.
Yeah. Um, Strength, we gave him a 3. I think this is just raw force and violence, like D-Kid mentioned. Um, he knows how to use it, and I do think he uses it well, but I think he lacks some strength, just
Hmm.
based on his frame. Bend, I could have given him a 4 here. I thought about it. I
Hmm.
gave him a 3 ultimately because I don't think that's his calling card. I think
Yeah, I
he's still
saw
he's fundamentally a bull rusher.
I saw flashes of it at times where he had nice bends, but yeah, I agree.
He likes to play like he's 6'7", right? Like
Hmm.
that's his natural style. Pressures, I gave him a 3. You gave him a 3. Edge setting, I think that's where his weakness is. He's not a
Hmm.
great edge setter, and I did. This is where I saw tackles really take advantage of his difference in size compared to them. But he did drop into zone. I like that. You gave him a 3.
Hmm.
I gave him a 4 here. I saw him drop back as a linebacker and be really solid,
Yeah.
and he's got the foot quickness and the athleticism to do it. So I gave him a 4. This is the one area where we differed. Durability, we both gave him a 4. Giants grade, you gave him a 2. I gave him a 3. And a goon grade, you gave him a 4. I gave him a 3. Overall, you gave him a 3, average NFL player. I gave him a 3.16. I gave him
Hmm.
the same score I gave Elijah Roberts, but for different reasons. I just really like. I mean, it's things like versatility and drop zone and his explosiveness that I thought he did enough where I would feel comfortable taking a guy like him. With Roberts, I would say just because of his size, I'd be comfortable taking him at pick 65.
Hmm.
Depending on how the board shakes out. With Walker, I'm probably not touching him until the fourth round.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of this is, I mean, we obviously have talked, we'll continue to evolve our grade scale and see like that. But also, this is like grading towards like a perfect, well-rounded edge. And sometimes that these numbers aren't going to always equal that because yes, like he has that drop zone and whatnot, which helps his score. But if you're not dropping your edge, I don't care that he's a 2 if he's better in all the other areas. Like so, it
Yeah.
it it's interesting when trying to grade these
I mean,
guys.
there are times I saw him and I'm like, this guy could be like an elite, like extraordinarily heavy hook defender. Like, because he
Mhm.
has really good back pedal. If you watch him, I'm surprised how quickly he moves. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's a versatile player. I like him. If he was 20 pounds lighter, I think we would be talking about him as an off-ball linebacker, right?
Yeah.
I think he has the frame and the play style to be like a really good off-ball linebacker if he dropped 20 pounds, but he is what he is, right?
Yep.
Um, I think he's basically a situational edge, and that's a good player. I mean, that's a useful NFL player, but a day 3 guy.
Mhm.
Um, so those are our 2 guys today. That was Walker and obviously Elijah Roberts. We're both a little higher on Elijah Roberts, not necessarily from the score standpoint. At least I'm not, um, but just prototype. And I think he's a better fit for the Giants. So we'll add to this collection of players as we go along. But those are our 2 for today. With that, why don't we hop into some combine stuff at about 38 minutes?
Yep. Sounds good. Um, so yeah, for anybody interested, and I'll attach it to this video, and I'll put it in the stuff at the end. But last year we did a combine episode preview, and we basically went through these articles by PFF that really went into how important each drill is in the combine, and we're going to reference that article again. Sal's going to give you some ideas of what are the important ones, what not important. We went into way more detail with this one last year, but we're going to give you kind of the high level of it this year. And then in addition to that, I'm going to talk about some of the people to watch from each position group, and I'm going to give you some idea of the guys who are from the freak lists and whatnot who are really going to show out. But I'd also like to try to call out some names of some guys that kind of need to show out here. So we'll just go along. We'll talk about some players as we go through this.
Oh, all right. Which position you want to go from the top from quarterback?
Yeah, let's start with quarterback.
All right. So I don't know. Do we have any quarterbacks in the freak list for
No quarter,
this?
no quarterbacks on the freak list that I was seeing, but Jalen Milrow really probably should have been on the freak list. I don't know how he didn't end up
a-
there.
And the one guy worth discussing here. That's
Yes.
the one quarterback in this class whose combine performance could dramatically alter his draft stock, one
Mhm.
way or another. Jalen Milrow is a freak athlete. We've made mention of it before. Excuse me. That he was the one guy on that Alabama team 2 years ago that was felt to be faster than Jameer Gibbs.
Yep.
And Jameer Gibbs ran like a 4.35 or something like that, right?
Yeah, not even
Uh,
just felt to be faster. His GPS numbers were faster. Like,
right. So and you see it on tape. I mean, Jalen Milroe is really fast. He's very explosive as a runner, and he's a strong guy. Right? He's a bulldozer out there as a runner. Um, so he has that going for him. I expect him to run. I expect him to run at the combine, and I'm sure he's going to wow people with his 40. I mean, There's some people think he's going to run a sub 4.3, which is crazy.
mhm.
So it's going to be wild watching him go out there now. Um, Other than his explosive testing for Milrow, there's no one big trait that predicts NFL success from a quarterback, at least from combine drills, which is why nobody really takes it seriously. If there's anything that has the most wins above replacement, it's probably hand size or three cone drills, which makes some sense with hand size. You want guys who can grip the NFL football, but Joe Burrow had 9-inch hands. Like what does that
Mhm.
mean? I know Milrow came in at under 9-inch hands at eight something, and the issue with that is, can you grip the football and hold on to it? Now he had 11 fumbles this year, which is not reassuring when you find out that his hand size is small.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an
so
issue when it shows up on tape as an issue.
right. Exactly. But there's not a lot here, that you're looking for. I think Miller is the one guy everybody's going to be tuned in to see what does he run on 40 times. But for quarterbacks, I'm going to ignore most of the stuff and say what's going to matter are their medicals and their interviews with the teams. When we're not privy to a lot of that, we're going to get bits and pieces of information along the way. But make no mistake about it, the interviews with the teams and their medicals are essential here,
Mhm.
especially for quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, especially if they're going at the top of the draft, teams want to know that they are physically safe to take, and they want to know when they put them on the whiteboard, you know, are they able to answer questions the way they want them to? How do they interview with the whole team? This is very important in the evaluation process. We're just not going to get to see it.
Yep. And it should be interesting to see who even participates in the athletic testing. A lot of times quarterbacks don't. I think it would be a mistake if Jalen Milrow doesn't, and I think he will because I think he's going to be the talk of Indy after he performs. He has that type of athleticism. But two other guys, just keep an eye on. I'd like to see do some athletic testing. I'd like to see if Will Howard goes out there. He's a bigger guy. See what type of testing he does, and then a guy who I think another guy probably needs to do it, and I think will test well is a guy like Riley Leonard. He'll probably go out there and he could probably put on a show. Not to the Milrow level, but
Yeah, and that can help his draft stock, right?
mhm.
Like for Leonard to make Leonard's case to be drafted by someone is, I'm a dual threat option, and I'm a legitimate dual threat option with NFL level traits. So he has to go out there and test well. Will Howard to some degree, although he's a better quarterback than Riley Leonard overall, I would say. I think Will Howard can also do the same thing. These are guys who are jockeying for position on day three and day two,
Mhm.
so I don't know how much day two, certainly, high day three guys. We'll see where they land. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be interviews. All right, next position, and I know we have some guys here. I believe at least we
We
do.
do.
Yeah,
Yep.
is running back. So on running back, let's go through some of the traits that historically have predicted Success. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis in the 40 time.
Yep.
It's not all that important. It has value. The 40 time has value, but no more than the broad jump, and actually less than the 10-yard split.
Hmm.
Which makes sense, right? The 10-yard split is your quickness. How quickly can you get past that line of scrimmage, find a hole? That has a little bit more bearing, but there's no drill even remotely close in historical value to running backs than the three cone.
Hmm.
The three cone by far is the most impactful drill. The guys who have elite three cone drills are often the running backs who perform the best at the NFL level historically. And if you think about it, what is the three cone measuring? It's really measuring short area agility, right? And quickness. Makes sense for running backs. So I think when you're watching the running backs, pay attention to who's putting up the best three cone numbers, followed by things like their 10-yard split and their broad jump. The 40 is less important.
Yep. And I mean, I think you saw a guy who I was a huge fan of constantly beat the drum that he was running back one and ended up being this year was Bucky Irving. He went out there last year. A lot of people were big up Bucky Irving fans too. And then he ran a 4.55, and you really saw people drop off of that Bucky Irving hype train. You look at it though, we told you that wasn't that important. You see running backs run 4.5, even 4.6s sometimes to still have success in this league. But go look at his 10-yard split, 70th percentile.
Right.
Like 154 is very, very solid 10-yard
No,
split.
no, he didn't do a 3 cone, did he?
He didn't, but I bet you would have done well. You don't see.
No.
Here's the issue: is since they started messing with the times and like the 3 cones and the shuttles are like late at night, teams have stopped. Players have stopped performing in those, so you'll see them less. But it's hopefully we'll get some of those, but you're definitely gonna see them less than you have in the past.
Yeah, I'm just looking up to see if there are other guys who are good in the NFL that I can point to, like a 3 cone that was elite. I'm not seeing one for Jameer Gibbs.
Christian McCaffrey had an elite 3 cone.
There you go. And
I can look at what it was, but I know for a fact that he did.
yes, he had,
I think it
yep,
was a 6.6.
6.57, 6.57.
Yeah,
So he was an elite 9.97 3 cone score on the ARIA. So there you go. There's
yeah.
an example. I imagine Saquon Barkley did, but I don't know. They didn't do full testing then, right? The year he came out, or
It's all up to the guys. I can see what it is, but here's some examples of just some guys like Le'Veon Bell was a guy
he
who did
did
not.
say, yeah, Saquon didn't do a 3 cone.
So Le'Veon Bell, when he ran a 4.6, again talking about guys where that's not a big. That's a real that a lot of people will get killed for running his 4.5, 4.6. He ran a 4.6. His 3 cone 6.75, 95th percentile. So like it's something to keep an eye on, and just overall, I wouldn't overreact to running back testing in general. It's not that big of a deal. Running backs, the tape is the most important thing.
Right. Um, yeah, here we go. Here's a good one. D Kid point out. Kieran Williams, he tested terribly coming out of Notre Dame a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago, but his 3 cone was really good. 707, great
Mm-hmm.
3 cone drill. Everything else is trash, but his 3 cone and his 10-yard split were excellent. Were good, well, not excellent, but they were great. So
Yeah.
everything else is trash. His 40 times, everything else is garbage. His 3 cone is 10 years old, and he's a solid NFL player. So again, just illustrating that you don't see it all in just the 40 time. Focus on the 3 cone and the 10-yard split for running backs. They do tend to predict more success. And I just think some of that is what kind of running scheme you're putting them into. There's more
Mm-hmm.
intricacy in this, right? But ultimately, I think a lot of these teams, especially these West Coast offenses, are running a lot of wide zone. Um, and I think guys who run a lot of wide zone, and just to some extent McVay, who mixes it up with inside zone, these guys with short area quickness and that 10-yard split and the quick area agility, they're very valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say, you know, we said what are the important ones to look out for, what's to not put too much weight in. But again, I'm saying it again. We'll tell you positions where you really should look into the athletic testing. Running back, really, really put what you thought today about these running backs, and don't change too much because of this combine. With that said, I'll give you some freaks, even though we just kind of said it doesn't matter too much. But I'll give you guys some freaks anyway.
Go for it.
Um, the first one here I have is Bashol Tutton, I believe. I
Yep.
don't know if I pronounced that right, but Virginia Tech. Um,
Excellent running back, by the way.
yeah, he is 5'11, 208 pounds. He clocked a 4.32 40-yard dash, and he reached a 23.15 max velocity. Bench pressed 400 pounds, had a vertical jump of 39 inches. And this year he was tied for third in the nation with 4 runs of 50 plus yards. He averaged more than 6 yards per carry, went for 1,159 yards and 15 touchdowns. So athletic freak there out of Virginia Tech.
Virginia
Um,
Tech is going to produce some problems this year.
yep.
I agree.
Um,
So,
they have on this list Ashton Genty. For the record, Ashton Genty is not participating in the combine. He's just going to be doing interviews and medicals. But yeah, to put here for people worried about maybe how fast is he if he's kind of ducking the combine. Well, this is what we have as far as GPS timing. He repeatedly topped 22 mile per hours in the game, and then also he squatted more than 605 pounds. And to the point,
It's
BYU
ridiculous.
strength coaches wouldn't allow him to go any heavier
Yeah.
because they're worried about him hurting himself. He's gotten comparisons to LaDainian Tomlinson and Maurice Jones-Drew, among others.
Emmett Smith, for those who are old enough to remember, he
Hey,
plays a lot like Emmett Smith, who was impossible to tackle. Just people just bounce off him.
and last one here, shout out Jabri. I don't know if he's in the chat, but Marcus Yarns out of Delaware. Um, Uh, he uh he should vertical jump close to 40 inches and run around a 4.4 in the 40-yard dash, but really good player this year. 1,250 all-purpose yards, 18 touchdowns. Against Penn State, he had a 66-yard touchdown run, and he averaged 7 yards per carry. So that's what we have for the running back. One guy I'll also throw out there just to mention, not a guy who's going to do well, but a guy is I think a good day would work well for him, but also I would not overreact to if he hadn't have a great time. Is Cam Scatabo? Cam Scatabo is not the fastest guy in the world, but he if he could kind of put some of that to bed, run in like the low 4.5s, I think that'd be really good for stock. But to be honest with you, yeah, like, run bad, Cam, because I'll take a discount on you, whether that's for the Giants or for my fantasy drafts in this coming August. I think he's a good player, and I think people are going to overrate a bad 40 time from him.
It's a little off topic, but a friend of mine, Adam K, is in the chat and pulled up he has a question, so I'm going to give him a shout out if you don't mind
Yep,
pulling
go
it
for
up.
it.
So Adam's a cool guy. I grew up with him. So he wants to ask, what do you think of Jackson Dart, and what are the chances his Niners actually get him in the second or early third round? It's a good. We like Jackson Dart. He was our
Mm-hmm.
QB4, behind Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, and at the time Jalen Milrow, who then fell off the planet. I think Jackson Dart is basically consensus QB3 in this class. And the question is a team in the top 15 to 20 that needs a quarterback, are they going to take a swing on Jackson Dart because they can't have access to the other two? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. So I think there's a chance he goes as high as like the back end of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly possible. He's a quarterback. There's also a chance of guys who like him who don't make it through the first round. They fall sometimes. It depends on
They
like
do.
the teams that need quarterbacks. Like, we've seen good players slide in the NFL draft at quarterback position.
If a team's
So
not willing to move up into the first round to go get that fifth year option for you, sometimes that means that they aren't going to take in the second round. That's not always true. Will Levis, Drew Lock. So sometimes they're just excited to get you at the beginning of the second, but a lot of times you'll see them move into the back end of the first for these guys
yeah,
where they fall.
I mean, it's hard to know where he's going to go. I think he's going to land in the second round probably. I
I
mean,
agree.
he feels like a top of the second round type guy. I think he's the kind of guy like kind of like a Will Levis, who teams liked but didn't want to necessarily slid. People were talking about Will Levis going as high as 4 overall to Indianapolis, and then they took Anthony Richardson, and then Levis just fell, right? And that's what happens to these guys. Like when they're tweeners in terms of value, if they don't get taken early, they can slide. And then he went to the top of the second round. He was, I think, the second pick in the second round, something like that, to the Titans. I can see Dart being taken probably in that 30. I would guess somewhere in the 33 to 40 range.
Yeah, and I think a guy like Drew Lock is another guy to look at. I think they have similar stock going into the draft. Remember, Drew Lock was a guy a lot of people talk about him mid first. A lot of people talk to him with our pick at 17, with Washington's pick it was at like 15 and whatnot. There's a lot of hype him there in New England towards the end of the first round. He ended up falling into the second round. I could see that being similar for Jack Star. Ultimately, I mean, I think there's going to be two quarterbacks taking the first round, but that could change. That all it takes is one team.
It could change this week. You might hear interviews and teams love Dart, and he starts
Yeah,
rising up. It happens every year, so we'll see what happens. I would say this though, to your point, we said this when we did our episode review of the quarterbacks. I think that Dart has a chance to be a better NFL player than he showed at college. I wasn't thoroughly impressed with his college play, and that like I think he shows traits and shows flashes of a really good player, but I think that the system he played in wasn't necessarily conducive to his greatest strengths. I think he was, and
Agreed.
I think that a guy like him in a Shanahan offense, I think would be a really good, like a good fit.
Uh,
He's
Agreed.
really, really good off play action, has some juice with his legs, has a good solid arm, and I think when he's working the middle of the field, he can be a very good passer. If you can teach him that rhythm passing the way Shanahan tends to take advantage of, I think he could be a really good NFL player. That's kind of where I want him to go, actually, is to a team like that to see him
Hmm.
maximize his value. So we'll see. But if you're thinking about him as like a backup quarterback to Brock Purdy, or maybe even a guy you have just waiting in the wings if the Purdy contract situation doesn't work itself out, I don't think that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Ole Miss was not a good fit for his skill set, and his watching was frustrating at times because it's like I want to see more throws like over the middle of the field, throwing with like zip because I see it at times like that's what I like. That's what I'm seeing him do best. I want to show that to me more. And it's all these deep passes. And I didn't see these like these deep fades as a strength. I didn't think he had the best deep accuracy in the world. And you see some question marks coming up about Jackson Dart's arm strength right now. And I just think
I mean, but just like with Shador Sanders, like I think
yeah,
over analysis. He's got a
it's
good arm. The
yeah,
kid has a good arm.
I think
Yeah.
people are overrating kind of what they're seeing with him running in this vertical offense, and they don't like his deep ball throwing as much as they're using it, but like he's got really good zip on the ball. He has more than enough NFL arm. Like that's his arm strength is not the problem, but he's
What else?
it's
And what I'll say about Jackson Dart is in the 0 to 20 yard range, he has no fear trying to throw that ball into a tight window. You
mhm.
know,
So
I
they
mean,
didn't ask
and
him to do it enough.
yeah, and I think when you saw him do that, you like what you saw, like, all
Mhm.
right, that's an NFL throw. He saw a whole shot over the middle of the field. He took it, he zipped it right in there. And I like those plays of Dart. To me, that screams McVay Shanahan prototype, right? It just
Yes.
screams that. So that's where I want him to go. If you're asking him to come in and run a more vertical oriented offense, I think you're asking him to not play to his strength. But that's your answer to, and I only answer because you're my boy. That's what I grew up with Adam. Um,
Mhm.
and he's a big Niner fan. So there you go, buddy. Um, shall we move on to wide receiver?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So wide receiver, this is an interesting category. I like taller receivers, especially for the Giants, because I'm tired of it. I don't. If you're shorter than me or my height, I don't want you drafted by the Giants to play wide receiver. I'm like 5'8", 5'9". I don't need you. Like, I don't want that guy playing wide receiver anymore. Um, I want guys who are taller mainly because I want X receivers and I want Malik Neighbors to be in the slot a lot more. But height is actually a negative predictor of NFL success for wide receivers. And you're like, well, why does that make sense? Probably because guys get overdrafted because of their height, right? Just their height, and a lot of other features are missed. So don't just look at the height, look at how tall. I would say look at how tall they play, not just
Mhm.
how tall they measure. Because there are guys who are 5'11" and 6 feet tall who play way above the rim compared to guys who are like 6'2", 6'3". So forget about that. Um, Here's what matters: the highest predictor of success, hand size. Actual hand size was the high by far. The greatest predictor of NFL success was hand size, followed by the 10-yard split again and the vertical. Now that makes sense to me, right? Those three
Mhm.
things make sense. You want a guy who has the mitts to catch the NFL football, so you want a guy with large enough hands to go get it. You want a guy who has an ability to explode off the line with that 10-yard split. And you want somebody who can get up there with his vertical and high point the football. That those are traits that you're looking for NFL success. So those are probably the most predictive things. Negative predictors, I mentioned height, 40 time Monty, negative predictor of NFL success. And so is the three-cone drill here. So I don't, the agility drills matter a lot less in predicting success for a receiver, although that seems somewhat counterintuitive. But the 40 time, that build-up speed, not that important. It's all about how quickly you get off the line of scrimmage, how explosive you are, and that 10-yard split, and basically your ability to high point the football with your hands. Those are the predictors of success. So why don't you go through some of the guys that we're looking at?
Sure, and there's a lot of guys here. So we'll start out with the biggest name probably in this draft, and that's Travis Hunter, wide receiver slash cornerback. He's gonna be working out with the cornerback, so you probably won't see him till those guys go out. But what we're saying here, he's expected to run sub 4.4. That according to Feldman, so that's a really good time. I wasn't sure exactly where he going. I thought he had a chance to go sub 4.4. I still am not 100% sure if he will. I think he'll probably be low 4.4s, maybe sub 4.4.
I
We'll
think
say.
if he's sub 4.4, I would be really impressed by that.
And it's possible, but yes, it'd be very impressive. He's supposed to jump around 40 inches, which I totally believe that one. His shuttle time is supposed to be elite. That also completely tracks. So yeah, and then he just mentioned here his gas tank and play speed are so rare, and I agree with that. So let's move on here. Here's a big one. Yeah, this is a guy we haven't talked too much about, but this is going to be a talk of the town during Combine Week. This may be one of the biggest points. He's going to blow up
Oh, yeah, I
that
know
box.
exactly who you're getting at. Mr. Combine himself loading
Yeah,
right here.
Savion Williams from TCU, 6'5", 225 pounds. Big athlete. He broad jumped 10 feet 6 inches. He posted a 40-inch vertical. He squats 600 pounds. He bench presses 355. He power clean 350, and he clocked a 22.5 miles per hour. And this is also a guy, keep in mind, he was a former quarterback. He's a strong arm. Teammates say he can throw the ball 80 yards. So absolute freak.
It's fucking Uncle Rico with a DK Metcalf at body.
Yeah.
It's
So
ridiculous.
Pete, I think this guy is going to be a big the NFL draft committee is going to love him. The NFL draft Twitter is going to love this guy because he's big and fast. He's going to get a lot more traction. I haven't dove into him as much as I should, so I really can't tell you how good his tape is. That's something I want to do. I've watched him a little bit, but he's going to be an interesting one. Do you have anything else? Have you gotten into Savion Williams really at all yet?
I've watched a lot of Savion Williams, and this is what I mean. If you guys haven't watched Savion Williams, you're in for a treat. You'll enjoy him. Um, he's a highlight reel guy. He's a Just Bomb. He was made for Just Bomb Productions. Shout out
Yeah,
Just Bomb. Do they still do stuff?
yeah, they
Kids?
do.
Okay. Yeah, he's a highlight reel guy. So Savion Williams, like I said, he looks like DK Metcalf, right? He's gigantic and he's built like a freaking Greek god. He runs like a I mean, it's hard to like describe how quick and explosive this guy is. Um, and once the football's in his hands, dude, he's a problem. Like he's impossible to bring down. He knocks guys over like he's a running back at his size. The problem is getting the ball in his hands because he's not the best receiver. He has some problems, running routes. He's not the best route runner. His hands are somewhat questionable, and he's a gadget. He's a gigantic gadget, is what he is. There's a lot there. The comp I think you're going to see for him over and over again is Cordarrelle Patterson. Just a versatile football player, just a freaking football player, right? He's just a weapon on offense. You use him in different ways. I can see Savion being this enormous running back one day. But he's definitely used like a running back a lot in that offense. But forget about what he is at the NFL. Just if you want to enjoy someone's testing this week, watch Savion Williams. Every time he's on, watch Savion Williams. I wouldn't be shocked if he puts up close to a 10 RAS score this week.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I agree. I'll also say I don't have anything on this. Alex pointed this out. Is there a correlation to the gauntlet mile per hour? I don't know how long they've tracked this. I don't really know if it's out there, but I do think that's probably something worth monitoring. I think that's an interesting thing when I watch there is seeing how fast they can work their gauntlet. The gauntlet drills are always fun to watch. So something to keep an eye on. It's cool they've started to give time. But to answer your question, I not that I know of. To the next guy on this list. It's funny this guy's on the freak list because Feldman kind of also just gets basically always preface this like he's a freak, but he's not actually that great of a
He's
tester.
not really a freak. Yeah.
Yeah, Tatori McMillan, 6'4", calls out he's a former volleyball star. Which kind of tracks. You see the way he attacks the football, and what they say is he has remarkable timing. which makes it seem like his leaps are bigger than they are, and that kind
Hmm.
of tracks. He's really good timing. He's a really good football player. He's really good hand-eye coordination, but he doesn't have the best vertical in the world. They're saying they're kind of prepping you for that. He's not going to jump a crazy vertical according to them. But one thing they did shout out here,
Hmm.
his speed's good, not great, but when he came into Arizona, he was running at 19.8 miles per hour, but he was clocking almost 22 miles per hour last summer. So, he's improved.
Build up speed, man. Long ass legs. They just keep going.
Yeah. So that's an interesting call, but again, it's kind of strange to me that they include him. But shout out T Mac, he's a very good player. The
Yeah, I don't think
next,
he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna test well at all.
no,
Honestly,
I don't.
I
I
I think
honestly,
his 40 time. I bet you is like 4.6, 4.5. I bet you his vertical's only like it's gonna be unimpressive. I mean, it's gonna be like a 30. It'll be like a 32, 33 inch vertical. It'll be okay, But I don't see this guy testing because he's not explosive, right? Like when you watch him, there's no
Mhm.
explosiveness in his game. He's smooth. The guy is a silky smooth route runner and mover, and like you said, his superpower is timing and high pointing, where he looks like he's 10 feet tall when he's catching the football, and he's almost unguardable when he does that.
Yeah, I think a comp to look at for I think a guy will probably get comp to a lot after this is a guy like T Higgins, who was not the biggest freak when he ran. He ran a 4.54 40-yard dash and only jumped 31 inches in the vertical jump. And I can see very similar numbers there for Torrey McMillan. I could see him drop in people's eyes after that because he's a guy that me and you don't see him in the light some others see him. Some people see him as like a blue chip top 10 lock. I think he's a very good player, but I think we both kind of think he's closer to Luther Burden than he is a tier of his own. Um,
I mean, we had Luther Burden graded higher than him, and
yeah.
I still think Luther Burden's a better wide receiver than him.
I think I had the same grade on them, and you had him overall. We had him um higher, but yes. So but regardless, again, don't overthink it though. At the end of the day, don't overthink it. He's a very good player, and he plays bigger and he plays faster than some of these numbers are going to show. But it's a guy who testing well could mean all the world to Dorian McMillan. If he comes out and runs in the 4.4, maybe he will get be a top 10 lock. We'll see. The next guy, shout out K Mac, shout out T, shout out our Notre Dame guys. Bo Collins from Notre Dame, former Clemson wide receiver. He let's see, he put up some freaky numbers last offseason in the training program, jumping 41 and a half inches and then broad jumping 10 feet 11 inches, almost broad jumping 11 feet. That's pretty crazy. 6'3", 208 pounds. So he's a guy who would definitely flash.
Oh,
Let's
yeah. Any
we
more?
Yeah, I have a couple more. Isaac Tesla, Teslaa from Arkansas. He's transferred from a Division II Hillsdale College, 6'2", 212 pounds. He's been testing very well and training ahead of combine. Expected a vertical jump around 40 inches, broad jump around 10 feet 7 inches, and he's running in the mid 4.4. So those are going to be good numbers for a wide receiver. Another Virginia Tech guy, Taquan Felton, spent his first 4 years at FCF Norfolk College before transferring to Virginia Tech, where he caught 70 passes for 10 yards and more than 1,000 yards the past 2 seasons. He's an intriguing talent at 6'4", 220 pounds with 33-inch arms. He displayed rare athleticism for the size, broad jump 10 feet 8 inches, is running a 4.42, and it is a 36.5-inch vertical. So some impressive numbers there. Another guy people are big fans of, Jaden Higgins at Iowa State. Started his career at Eastern Kentucky. 87 catches for 1,183 yards, 9 touchdowns, 6'3", 217 pounds. He has a wingspan of almost 80 inches, and he would not be surprised if he runs better than a lot many expect. But so this is more of a size thing for him, but they think he's going to run a little bit better than people think.
He's
Um,
He's a good football player.
he
Uh,
is.
He He's like one of the few like true outstanding prototypical X receivers you'll see. You don't see a lot of these types anymore, but he's very good at it.
Agreed. And no, I think I might have. I think there's no two more for you. So Alec Ayo Manor, I always forget how to pronounce it, but the Stanford wide receiver. He ran when he was back in Canada, he ran a 10.76 a 21.66 200. Oh no, but that was when he went back to went to Massachusetts Deerfield Academy, and he had his breakthrough versus Travis Hunter. We know all that. But yeah, 6'2", 210 pounds, and he's expected to run low 4.4s, maybe even high 4.3s. So that would be really good, especially for like a bigger body like him. And the last guy we have here, definitely not somebody who's going to be drafted highly, but this might be, this guy I think is the one to watch out for who can challenge the 40-yard dash record this year. And that's Arian Smith from Georgia. In 2021, he ran a blistering 10-10 in the 100, qualifying for the NCAA championship. He's part of the Georgia's 4x100 team that qualified for the postseason. He set a school record of 38.57. In 2023, the 6', 185 pounder started focusing on football. And, they're saying, given his track pedigree, it would not be surprised if he ran the 4.2s in Indianapolis. So a lot of guys, a lot of freaks here in the wide receiver group. D-Kid, shout out Tez. I don't have him there, but Tez is a guy who's going to run really well. Smaller guy, but he'll run well. Yeah. Anybody else that you wanted to shout out here, Sal?
No, I think you covered most of these guys who are on the freak list. I think, what I would just say is when you're watching these guys, especially the guys you guys are honing in on as you're doing your mocks and you're looking at targets for the Giants, just remember, just again, I'll go back to the testing things. Pay attention to hand size, 10-yard splits, and verticals for wide receivers. Don't get enamored by the 40-yard time. I'm old enough to remember Tyquan Thornton going in the second round to the Patriots based on his 40 time and being a complete bust. So be wary of that. And John Ross breaking the NFL record a 40 time, So there are other things that matter for receivers.
Yep, definitely.
All right, let's go to tight end. So, we're with what do we have, the 103rd pick in this draft, right? That's where we're taking our tight end as per usual. So target your tight end and pick 103.
Hey, maybe we'll get it with the Xavier McKinney compensation pick.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that already factored into our like allotted picks or no?
I think so. I think in
Okay.
PFF it is.
Okay. So tight end, not too dissimilar. Here's what matters the most by far: the 10-yard split. Kind of makes sense. But the three cone and height actually matter. Three cone height and 10-yard split are the biggest factors in order from most to least impactful. 10-yard split, three cone, and height for tight ends. Arm length, believe it or not, doesn't matter. Probably a negative indicator. Hand size has some effect. Vertical has some effect. Everything has a little bit of effect, and that's kind of expected. You want kind of an overall athlete, but again, the 10-yard split, the three cone, and height are the most impactful factors in tight end success if you go by metrics. And if you think about this for a second, again, you want somebody quick off the snap. You want somebody who has short area agility, which does matter for tight ends, and you do want somebody who has height, probably because you want guys long enough to be inline blockers. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? You have to you have to be a blocker and help at the edge position with your tackles and stuff like that. So I do think those matters. Obviously, height also matters in terms of just being a big target for your quarterback over the middle of the field, especially in a lot of seam routes. So DK, I don't know what Bauer's three cone was. Um, I'd have to look it up. Now, I will say that when you're talking about outliers, I don't know how much this stuff really matters, right? Like the outlier players like Brock Bowers, when you're talking about a generational talent, who knows what it is. But his three cone was elite. There you go. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. I'm looking at George Kittle. Um, But
Yeah, George Kittle had elite testing. I don't know if I don't have anything here for Brock Bowers. At least he didn't do anything at the combine, at least.
no, he just height and weight. That's all he did, and
Mm.
arm length. So, um, but like those are things to look for. I don't know. Were there any tight ends on this list?
There was one, and one thing I
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to,
yeah.
one
There's
thing I
one.
did wanted to add here was, I said I'd call it out as we went along here. I didn't think it really mattered for running back too much. I do think tight end something that you can put weight into this athletic testing. A lot of colleges don't really use their tight ends. They're really bad at using their tight ends. A guy like Harold Fannin. I probably wouldn't put too much weight into it because we know what we've done. We've seen him be the guy in the offense, and although I'm going to put some weight into it, I got to see him do that. With the other guys, it's like it's so rare to see a tight end used properly in the league, and really, it's a big projection with these guys. You see a lot of the athletes just dominate. I mean, look how many times so when you saw Jimmy Graham, you saw Antonio Gates, you saw these guys who were really just basketball players turned tight ends who came over and became some of the best tight ends we've ever seen. This is a position where you can really bet on traits, bet on athletes, and you can come away with some studs here and there. So, um,
And it's not measured at the combine, but this is a position where there are a couple of just data points that are very predictive, I think, of NFL success. You touch on it a lot. There's nothing more important than yak
mhm,
for a tight end, right? You want it, and along those lines, missed forced tackles. Like those two things are really important if you want to just look at data points for tight ends. You want guys who break tackles and get yak because ultimately, what is your tight end doing most of the time when he's running routes, right? He's getting over the middle, he's presenting a big target for the quarterback, he's getting the ball in space, and you're asking him to take his frame and basically truck guys and drag that ball for another 5 to 10 yards or more. So those things matter. You have data. There's plenty of data sets. PFF is one of them, but there's others that you can look at those for those stats. Um, but in terms of measurables, it's the things I just mentioned. So there's one tight end on this list, I believe, right?
yep. Yeah,
Yep.
the one tight end, and the guy has been rising on a lot of people's boards, and this could be the next step where he could really get into his conversation for tight end one, I think. And that's Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. He had 35 catches for 509 yards and 7 touchdowns this year. A really big target for Cam Ward. And he's expected at 6'5, 251 pounds to run in the low 4.5s, which is very impressive. And the Miami coaches are telling Feldman that they expect his shuttle time to be elite. So, a guy who's played wide receiver at times from Miami, uh, like I said, he's not really being talked about yet with the top tight ends, with the Loveland and with the I'm blanking
Warren.
Warren. Those are kind of being the top two guys of two different flavors. I think, there could be a conversation that Elijah Arroyo, who's, a lot of people's tight end three, could end up in that conversation after this combine. I'm interested what a guy like Harold Fannin runs, even though because people have some questions about his athleticism, but I do think the tape speaks for itself at some point with him. Oh,
Alex says Arroyo's not participating. I didn't realize he was hurt for the combine. Okay.
dang. That
Yeah.
stinks. So
Yeah.
maybe it's pro day though. We'll see.
So
But thank you for the shout out, Alex.
I will give. So our tight end one was when we did our tight end review was Harold Fannin Jr.
Mm-hmm.
from Bowling Green. And if you haven't seen Harold Fannin play, just go watch him against Penn State, against a dominant defense otherwise. And what you'll see is something impressive. Now, I don't think he's going to test elite. I'd be surprised if he does, right? I think Harold Fannin's going to test okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
he'll be like an average tester. But this is a guy who just over and over again on tape produces. And I think I put a lot of emphasis into that, especially when you produce against high-end schools. So um, if we are going to get a tight end, that's the guy I want personally.
Yeah.
Um, and I hope he falls to us somewhere.
And I understand where he's never gonna pass a guy like Tyler Warren and whatnot because he probably is not gonna have the athletic testing. And you're not gonna draft an undersized, not super athletic tight end as high as you're gonna draft a big athletic guy like Tyler Warren who was also productive. But also keep in mind what Tyler Warren was at 20 years old and what Harold Fannin is at only 20 years old right now. He is, one of the most productive tight ends we've ever seen. So, and Tyler Warren's one of the older guys. And it's not to try to take anything away from Tyler Warren. And I do think Tyler Warren will be drafted before Fannin, but I do think Fannin has the potential to be a better player in the NFL.
Yeah. I think Fannon's going to be very productive. I don't know where his ceiling is, but I think a very productive player is a pretty easy floor to expect from Harold Fannin Jr.
Mm-hmm.
A guy who will test well, I think, is Mason Taylor. I'm assuming he's there. But I think this is a
Mm-hmm.
guy who will test pretty well um, from LSU, and I think people will notice that he should be rising up the ranks. I wouldn't be surprised if if he ended up being tight end three. So um, let's go on to the next position group. Let me just pull it up here. We're moving into the trenches here, and the first one is offensive tackle.
Okay.
Um, and there are really not a lot of indicators of success here. It's not what you guys think. The big negative indicator for success, arm length. Yeah, you heard it right. The big negative for success for offensive tackle historically, when you look at data post draft, is actually arm length. Even though arm length is like the thing that everybody talks about for these tackles, often used to take guys who've played tackle for 3 or 4 years and say, nope, NFL guard, not a tackle. But it doesn't necessarily predict success. You know what does? The biggest indicator, the bench press. The bench press is the number one indicator for success. The 40 time is number two, and that's a stat we've gone over before. I'll let you touch on that. And then the vertical and three cone. So some agility, some explosiveness, but nothing bigger than the strength of the bench press and the 40 time. Um, Bench press is sort of self-explanatory, right? You want to be able to take on bull rushers and be able to drive them back. You want that power in a short area, power from the chest and the arms to drive back edge rushers and not let them drive the pocket and collapse it. But the 40 times is an interesting one. People don't think about that so much for tackles. But do you remember? Like, you want to talk to them about the 40 time stat that you
Yeah.
used to pull up?
Yep. Yeah. So this is something I found out a while ago when I was kind of just looking into what I found to be some of the more important uh numbers that translate. And for some reason, the one spot that translated the most for me under a certain threshold was offensive linemen running a 40-yard dash under 4.9. And it's very strange how well this can translate in to high level players. Just to go over some examples here. Jason Peters ran a 4.89. Rashawn Slater ran a 4.88. When we go back to the first page here and just kind of go through it. Um, Chris Paul, Callan Diaz, Eric McCoy, very good player. Kendrick Green hasn't really worked out. Jason Kelsey, Dare Rosenthal, Sam Cosmi has been a very good player. Taylor Lewan was a very good player. Tristan Wirfs is a very good player. Alan Barb, Richie Incognito, fantastic player. Chris Chester, Brian O'Neill, very good player. Lyden Murtha, Avante Collins, Trent Williams, all pro, fantastic player. Joe Staley, all pro, fantastic player. Bruce Campbell, Lane Johnson, Taron Armstead. And see, keep in mind, I was reading to you guys every single player they had listed here that ran on a 4.9. I wasn't just skipping people to try to stick my narrative. I skipped over the guys who didn't really have as good of a career. But do you see how high that translated? Where it seems like probably about 80% of the guys I listed there were high end football players, not just like, oh wow, this led to good, like, okay, football players. No, like, there is all pros, Hall of Famers listed all over that list, with probably like 5 or 6 guys who didn't hit at all. So that's something I want people to keep an eye on. And I really, I'm going to continue to push a narrative. Big guys who can run that fast translate.
There's two big guys on this list that
Mm-hmm.
are tackles in college that may or may not be NFL tackles. But I think they actually might crack those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, three if you include the guy who's a guard. So go through them and let's talk about where they might fit.
Okay, so I'll just start from the top here. All Ursula, a guy that we drafted in our mock draft last week, he put up a 152 10-yard split, which was a program record for Minnesota. And keep in mind, he is a 6'5", 339 pounds. Pretty crazy. He hit 18.34 miles per hour in the GPS. So if he can match that, 1.52 at that size, that's going to open some eyeballs. Duke's Jacob Monk last year had a 166, which was the fastest. So that's like significantly higher. He also had a 27.5 vertical jump, 92-inch broad jump, and a pro shuttle of 461. So pretty damn good for a guy that big. Anything to add on Ursley? I don't know who you're targeting here, so I'll stop after each one.
No, Ursary I really like, and I think Ursary has a chance to really stick at tackle in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
He has the size, he has the power. He plays a mean kind of football. They list him as an O lineman because they're not sure whether he'll be a tackle or a guard at the NFL. But I actually think his speed and his explosiveness will translate. Um, he's the one I'm really focused on here. I think Ursary's a guy that if he runs a good 40, and I think he might, the speed he has, I mean, a 1.52 10-yard split. Um, that's a guy that I think could crack the 4.9 number. I can see his stock rising, you know, perhaps into the second round. Um, he's another guy that I think if he's there at 65, if he's there in the third round, strongly consider him. I don't know if he'll be there, but I would consider him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, to add to what if those numbers are real with Ursley, a 152 10-yard split. I'm looking at the mock draftable database, and the best time they've ever had here was 159 for a 10-yard split. So that's Lane Johnson was second best with 161. So that's like would be a significantly good time from a huge player. So let's see if that's real. It's hard to believe, but that would really blow it up. The next
Well,
guy here,
speaking of freakish 10-yard splits, is the next guy.
yeah. Next guy, and this is a guy who I want to do with one of our
One of the film reviews.
upcoming
Yeah.
reviews because I've reviewed him a little bit, and this guy I think could end up being my offensive tackle one, and that's Armin Membu from Missouri. He could end up being a guard in the NFL. I do think he can stick a tackle, but I really want to dig into him a little more. But 6'3", 332 pounds. He ran an electric 10-yard time of 163 and a 20-yard split time of 2.80, and clocked in 20 miles per hour on the GPS. He also squatted 650, cleaned 375, and bench force 425. So keep in mind here, they're saying that was electric. So that was officially timed at a 163, which would be third best all time in mock draftables database.
Membu's going in the first round.
Oh yeah,
I mean, and he
might be the
may
first
be
offensive lineman.
he could be the first offensive lineman depending on where Will Campbell goes. I think he'll end up being number two, but it's possible he goes ahead of Campbell, depending on, and some of that could be based on testing here. He's a guy that I can pass. You can see him passing people here. Um, really good football player, versatile on the O line. He's If I had to peg, this guy's a 49er. And this guy just screams 49er to me. They
Yeah,
need a tackle, they need interior line help. He can do
makes a lot
both.
of sense.
I think he's 100%. He's really good in those zone blocking schemes. I see this guy being a 49er like all day, every day. So there you go, Adam. There's your draft pick, Armand Member, the Missouri offensive lineman. Um, no, there's another guy I wanted to talk about. There are two other guys actually. So Will Campbell, we might as well talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
He's projected to be the top tackle off the board. And I'll quickly, he's 6'6", 320, the kid out of LSU. You should know who he is by now. It's clocked running 17.9 miles per hour in a game, and he was clocked with a 157 10-yard split with a 1 yard lead in. I don't know what his electric time would be. We'll see what it translates to, but he is clearly athletic and fast. So he's another guy that I think could potentially hold up at tackle. D-Kid definitely thinks he's a guard, but D-Kid thinks everybody's a guard. So I don't
Yeah.
know what that means.
And to keep in mind, like all these times we're hearing gives these guys a shot to break that 4.9 number. And if they break that 4.9 number, that's an elite list of guys
Yeah,
who
I got
are there.
two more guys to go over real quick here, okay?
Mhm.
Because I think one, they're both worth watching. They're not like household names yet, but
Yep.
they might become names you're going to watch. One guy we went over early in our review at the beginning
Mhm.
of the year when we did our film and freak list, Charles Grant, the tackle from William and Mary. This was he was a wrestler. Now he's a little undersized to play tackle at the NFL level. He's 6'4.5", 301 pounds. He's a little small to play tackle. Usually these guys are at least 315, 320. Um, but 21 miles per hour on the GPS, Monty, a 32-inch vertical, 35-inch arms. So, not that it matters, but it matters to scouts. And a clocked, fully automatic, supposedly fully automatic timed 1.44 10-yard split.
How are these times real, man? All of these people are like breaking the records. Like,
Was he
was this
was he
University of
clocking?
Michigan?
Yeah, was he clocking Michigan? I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
They all went
So,
there. This is three-cone in Michigan. 144 is stupid fast for any human being, much less a 301-pound offensive lineman.
let me put this in perspective. The best 10-yard splits ever on the mock draft database. Chris Johnson, 1-4. Des Bryant, 1-4. Justin Coleman, 1-4-2. Andre Allison, 143. Mike Wallace, 143. Marquise Goldwyn, 143. Danny Woodhead, 144. Jason Edward Bay, 144.
Ridiculous, like wide receiver, like speed. Now you got to watch Charles Grant, and you see it. Like he
You
is
too.
quick. He's fast. Now, is he a great lineman? I think he's a good lineman. Can he hold up a tackle at 301 pounds? I doubt it. But who knows? I mean,
You can
he's
put
an
on weight and
interesting.
stay
And
fast, though.
K-Mac makes a great point. Jeremiah snuck him into the top 50 today. When Dan Jeremiah puts you at 50 on his top 50, he's telling you one of two things. Either he's hearing this guy's name quietly around NFL circles, or he just loves the guy. And he's like,
Mhm.
I gotta get him on my list, and he does that for guys. And that watch to see if he stays on Jeremiah's list as we go forward, because if he does, it means he's hearing it from NFL teams. Grant is an interesting prospect. Now, I don't know like where he fits again in the NFL level, but his testing, like if any of this is real, it's going to be very eye-opening. Um, there
And
was one, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay. And I'll stay Sal. They finally have William Mary tape there, so that's another guy. Maybe do Membu and Charles Grant together soon.
Let's do it. Let's do it next week. Membu and Charles Grant.
I'm down. I'll say, dude, I was watching some clips of this guy just on Twitter, and oh my god, man, the way he can just like completely cut off, like he can cut off like a nose guard from the tackle position with his. It's insane how
Fast.
quick he
He's really quick, man. Yes, D kid. He's tight end one. You're right.
is.
All right, last guy I want to go over is a FCS guy. What's an
Mhm.
offensive line review like discussion without an FCS guy? Jackson Slater, 38 on the list, from Sacramento State. Total standout All-American honors from the FCS in 2024. Started in 44 games in his career. Didn't allow a single hit on his quarterback all season.
Wow.
6'3", 320, power clean 405 pounds, squat at 635, and topped out at 19.96 miles per hour on GPS in-game. Another guy with speed and power. FCS dude. I don't know where he's going to land, but listen, you're looking for like a developmental tackle. He's there on day 3. Jackson Slater. See how he tests, guys. See if he measures up with his 40 time testing, his bench press. Just look for those things because it sounds like he's strong as shit and he's fast as shit.
And he has a
So
1-1 10-yard split. No, I'm kidding.
all right. Offensive tackle is always fun to go through these big guys. Let's move on to interior offensive line. How are we doing on time? We're doing okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know, right?
We're going to have a long ass episode, and that's fine because we do that. All right.
Yeah, it's
Interior O line.
postseason, baby.
So here's
It's
what
all
doesn't matter in interior O line, and this makes sense. Arm length makes no difference. Negative
Mhm.
impact. And who cares, right? You can have T-Rex arms on the interior O line as long as you're strong as shit. What does matter? The single most important thing for interior O line, the short shuttle. And I think this is well documented that guys who perform well in the short shuttle on the interior O line are guys who generally do well. And that makes sense. They're in a phone booth and you need quick feet in a small confined space. The next most impactful thing, the 3-cone drill. Again, makes sense. Lateral quickness. The next most important thing, the broad jump, and then the bench press. I think all of those make sense. You want to be quick, strong, and you want to have a really strong hand punch. with the bench press. That's what makes a good tackle. So short shuttle, three cone, broad jump, and bench press.
Yep. There you go. So we only have one guy here to talk about. Um, and it's a guy we're both big fans of, and it's Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. He's a guy who shifted from guard to left tackle when Josh Simmons got hurt this year. 6'4", 320 pounds. But would it shock you here, Sal, if I told you that Donovan Jackson also is supposed to set the 10-yard split record? So,
Of course he is.
so we're gonna have a lot of record breakers this year. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen this year. We have some fast guys. I doubt all these guys will hit this time, but really good time there. Vertical jump of 30 inches and broad jump 9 feet 7 inches. One thing I want to throw at you here, Sal.
So that's
Obviously,
just that broad jump matters. Bench
Mhm.
press matters. They don't. We don't know his bench numbers.
Yeah.
Short shuttle numbers.
What one thing I want to throw at you here, Sal, is Donovan Jackson's mostly been a guard throughout his time at Ohio State. And he was for the most part an okay guard. He was good. He went back to school for a reason. He really, it took him a little time, but he really impressed at tackle. Do you think that there's an idea that tackle is his best position in the NFL?
I think he played so well at tackle down the stretch, especially in the playoff push for Ohio State, that it is hard for me not to value him as an NFL tackle. Um,
I think it's
I can't unsee what I saw in those final like 4 or 5 games from him.
he's
And
simply better at it.
is he better at a tackle?
I mean, his
I thought,
best tape is at tackle right now, I would say.
well, I mean, it was most impressive tape just because
Yes.
of what he was doing.
Hmm.
But I'll put it this way: I think this is a guy that, if you bring him to the NFL, can definitely hold up a tackle.
Hmm.
Is he going to be an elite tackle? I don't know, but I think he can
Hmm.
hold up and be a solid tackle. I have a feeling that his play at tackle is going to improve his play at guard, and I think he has a
Hmm.
chance to be an upper echelon guard in the NFL. So I still think that at the end of the day, he's a better guard than a tackle at the NFL
Hmm.
level. But it's hard. You can't unsee the tackle tape, right? And the value is ridiculous there.
It's certainly something you have to think about at this point in time.
Yeah. Um, would I put him at tackle if I'm the Giants and again, third round pick? This is where we're gonna get these guys, right? If he's there at pick 65, which I doubt he is, I think he'll be gone in the second round. But let's just say, well, for whatever reason he fell to 65. He's one of those guys where I'm like, oh, Donovan Jackson's on the board, run up and take him. You know,
Hmm.
run up and take him. Um, So I would take him, and I would just, he's one of those guys, man, you take and you kind of figure it out after you take him. I don't like that strategy for most players, but for a guy like Jackson, there's a place on my team for him
Yeah,
somewhere. Yeah. So I don't know, but he's a really intriguing prospect. All right. Did we cover all the offensive spots yet? I think we did,
I
right?
think that was the last one. Yep, because I
All
don't
right.
think they have any centers.
Let's shift over to defense since we're just chugging right along here. All right. So our first defensive position, we're going to stay in the trenches here. And this is important for the Giants, interior defensive line.
Okay.
What are the drills that predict success in the NFL at the interior D line? Well, kind of mirroring a lot of the stuff on the O line, the number one predictor is actually the three cone drill. The number two predictor and number three predictor are bench press and weight. So three cone, bench press, weight. A lot of other things do contribute, like your 40 time, your broad jump, your arm length to some extent, but there's nothing more like by far it is three cone, bench, and weight. So let's go through our interior defenders, and we have a few of them here to go over.
Yeah, this is a really good defensive line group in general. So, first one I'm going to bring up here, he's number 2 in this list, and former 5-star recruit Shamar Stewart. You know, his defensive line coach, quote unquote, he's a freak man. Um, is that actually
You skipped one.
Sean Spencer?
Yeah, well, you skipped one, but go ahead. You skipped a
Shamar
couple.
Stewart still.
Hmm?
Never mind. Oh, it's Jamar Stewart. Um, yeah. So he will supposedly in the low 4.5s is what they're saying. That is insane. At 280 pounds, he's supposed to run near a 4.44. That's crazy. Um, and he can fly. He said at worst he'll run like a 4.62, 4.63. He said he'll be surprised if he doesn't break 4.60. So Sean Spencer, former Giant coach.
You have to almost keep Shamar Stewart in line with both D line and edge because he's like the other guys at A&M. He's a tweener. He's a big freakish monster who can play probably he can play I think he can play edge and he certainly has been playing edge, but you can certainly line him up on the inside too. He's a big dude. So yeah, I mean I think he's gonna be a big tester. You saw him at the Senior Bowl, man. Like he was really good. He's getting push, dominating in drills. I think Shamar Stewart's going to be a solid NFL player. Is he going to be a guy who's like a big stats guy? I don't know about that, but I think he's a guy that's going to mess up offensive lines for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, and if he runs like that, that's going to get his interest. You saw what a guy like Don Terry Poe, what happened to him when he blew up the
Yeah.
combine. This is from a very good recruit. So, next on the I have here, next interior defensive lineman we have here at number 6 on this list was Jordan Birch from Oregon. Is another 5-star recruit. And he is more productive than the last guy we talked about, notching 11 tackles for losses with 8.5 sacks, 6 passes broken up. He's been productive there, and then matches it with a 6'5", 295-pound frame. He's supposed to jump 35 inches, and he hit 20.75 miles per hour on GPS.
He's another guy who is more of an edge rusher, I would say, but he's really more like a 3-4 DE. Right? I mean, I think he plays outside tackle at the collegiate level, but I mean, at his size and his strength, I do see him playing a little bit more on the inside. So I think he's a 3-4 D. So I guess I would include him in the same thing. But yes, he's a great tester. He's an elite athlete, as you mentioned, coming out of college, out of high school, and he kind of put it all together this year. Not a great run stopper, not as much as you would expect for guys, but as a pass rusher, some pretty elite numbers in production. So. I really like him. Is he gonna be there at pick 34? Yes. Is he gonna be there at pick 65? Maybe. There's another one of you guys who fits the prototype of the guys we've been talking about. So that's one to watch, and we'll have to eventually do a tape review of him. But I really like Jordan Birch.
Agreed. Um, I'm gonna skip a couple guys here because we'll probably talk to them more about in the edge room. This guy could probably even a little bit, but the last guy I'm gonna do here for the interior defensive line is Ashton Gillot from
Hmm.
Louisville. A one-time Florida high school standout power lifter and shot putter. He's made the freak list a few times now. He had 39 and a half tackles for loss in his career to go 25 and a half sacks. 6'2", 275 pounds, clocked around 20 miles per hour on GPS, and he's a vertical jump of 36 inches. So another guy who probably should test well. I don't know if you have anybody else.
I
Oh,
mean,
actually, there
Kenneth,
is.
Kenneth Grant. I mean, I think he's worth mentioning.
Yes, I had D line. There's a couple DTs I missed. Okay, let's go through the DTs. Yeah, talk about Kenneth Grant.
So Kenneth Grant, for my money, the third best defensive tackle in this class from Michigan. Monstrous human being, 360 pounds. He's expected to run a sub 540 at 360 pounds, which is just think about that for a second.
Mhm.
Number 3 on the freak list this year. He's been clocked at 18.75 miles per hour on the GPS at 350 pounds of playing weight. He had a 29-inch vertical at 350, 32 tackles, 6.5 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 3 quarterback hurries, 5 passes broken up. If you want to see a rep of Kenneth Graham's athleticism and speed, go look up Kenneth Graham, Nick Singleton. There is a
Yeah,
rep where Nick Singleton, the running back from Penn State, is trying to run away from the Michigan defense, gets by the line, and he looks like he's in the open field. And Kenneth Grant at 360 pounds chases him down and takes him out um, Authentic is here. Welcome, Authentic says I'm higher on Kenny Grant than I'm on Mason Graham. You know, I think they're very different players. You know, I think Mason Graham is a higher floor player as a three tech, and Grant is a guy with the upside, right? He has the size,
Hmm.
speed, athletic. He has the upside of like being a real monstrous disruptor. I wouldn't be shocked if at the end of the day Grant ended up having a more successful career than Mason Graham. That wouldn't shock me at all. But he is really a freak. He's got to put it together, I would say, right in production. But I think he can.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think we see a guy like Dexter Lawrence at his size and what he ran the 40. That's the type of prototype you're going to be looking at when you see Kenneth Grant. But like, can he do that? Can he develop into what Dexter Lawrence became?
And Feldman combines the D line. He includes a lot of edge rushers with DT, so we probably should, combine them. But a lot of these guys can play both, right? Both
Hmm.
interior and exterior. That's just the nature of this draft class is loaded with these guys who are listed as edges, but they're really 3-4 DNs or 4-3
Yeah,
DNs,
there's
so they're hand in the dirt guys.
yeah, there's still two more D tackles though that I did miss initially because I was filtering by D line. So we have Tyleek Williams from Ohio State, 6'3", 327 pounds. He's wouldn't be shocked he runs a 40 and the 4.8. That's pretty crazy.
That's
And a 10
nuts.
yard in a 10-yard split under 4.65. Again, that'd be pretty nuts. Very, very good player. And then one more fantastic player in Darius Alexander out of Toledo. 6'4", 304 pounds, bench press 400 pounds, hit 20 miles per hour in the GPS and vertical jump 30 inches last offseason. Really productive player, 40 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. And he had 150-yard 58-yard pick six last year. So really, really good player, older player, but really good player. We can get into some of these edges too, are kind of more borderline. But you have anything else, Sal?
No, no, no. I think, and let me list off the factors for edge players real quick.
Yep.
It's a little bit different. I mean, the three cone and bench and the weight matter more for the interior D line guys. For the edge defenders, s- it's a little bit more spaced out, where kind of everything matters. 40 time, vertical, three cone and shuttle are probably the things to look for. I would argue that, even though the 10-yard split is listed as kind of like a neutral to negative factor, I would say that does matter. But if you look at just the pure data, it's actually vertical, 40, three cone, and shuttle that matters most for edge. But they're almost equal. They're like kind of slower, lower impact. What you're really looking for in edge rusher at the end of the day, if you're going by combine measurements, is their overall athletic testing profile. It's the total package. There's no one trait that really stands out.
Yep. All right, so let's get into it. We have some really good edges here. I'm going to start with the guys who are more that borderline here. So kind of go over the both categories that Sal talked about that could apply to these guys. And the first one, a guy we heavily debated in the second round of our mock last week, and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, 6'4", 280 pounds. He was Big Ten sack leader in 2023 at Purdue. He was voted as a team captain at 19 years old. He transferred home to Texas A&M and led the Aggies with 5 sacks in 2024 and had 14 tackles for loss, one fewer than he had in 2023. And his defensive line coach, again, Sean Spencer. I think that's probably a good connection for us. Probably something we haven't really talked about, but a guy who has, a history with this organization might be a valuable resource for a lot of really good players in this draft coming from the defensive line at Texas A&M. Coach Chaos, we know him well. I think Scorton's 40 time will be in the 4.7 range. Pretty insane for his size. And it adds his agility numbers will be fast.
Yeah. And you see it on tape. Nick Skeleton
Mhm.
is Skeleton is very fast, very quick for a guy his size. He moves a lot faster you would expect somebody of his size to move. So another guy I think can play the interior and exterior. He's an edge rusher, but I think he's a guy who can you can put his hand in the dirt and play on the inside. Um, a different prototype of edge rusher that we didn't go over yet is a guy like Abdul Carter.
Mhm.
Potentially the top pick in this class overall, 6'3", 254. He was clocked at 4.4840 time and a 4.35 shuttle to go with an equally impressive 10.7 broad jump. Those are freakish explosive testing numbers, and a 33.5-inch vertical. Um, he was the first consensus unanimous All-American from Penn State since Saquon Barkley in 2017. I do now Abdul Carter, if I'm not mistaken, is not testing, right? Because of his
Yeah,
injury.
that's what
Yeah.
DK just added.
Yeah. But he is I don't know if he's gonna do anything at his pro day, but he is a freak athlete. It's worth mentioning, and it's not gonna affect him at
Mhm.
all. He's gonna go
No, everyone
probably
knows he's
top
a
two in
freak.
his class, top two, top three, but he'll be up there. Let me see. Here's a guy that I want to talk about because he's really fascinating, and I don't know where to put him. Jalen Walker from
Hmm.
Georgia. Now he's listed as an edge linebacker. Now, he's 6'2", 245. So definitely on the smaller end for an edge rusher. Um, his If you watch Jalen Walker from Georgia, what stands out is how aggressive and explosive he is coming downhill. Whether he's lined up as an off-ball linebacker or lining up as an edge, this guy's a serious problem. He's a defensive weapon. Won the Butkus Award as the top linebacker in the country this year with 60 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. Um, and he's expected to run in the 4.4s. I
Wow.
mean, that's a 4.4 edge rusher, or even a 4.4 offline linebacker. I mean, that's a crazy speed. Um,
Hmm.
so I don't know how he's going to get utilized at the next level. Maybe he's utilized kind of like Micah Parsons, right? Like he's kind of just slid all over the field. But whatever he is, he's a problem. Now I've got some Isaiah Simmons PTSD from this guy, and
Yeah.
like these tweeners always make me nervous. But he is definitely a force, and I think he's going to test well. He's probably going to be fun to watch this week. It
Yeah.
depends on where you classify him.
And I'm really interested to see what like his arm length comes in at because that's gonna have some decision on if people see him more as an off ball or an edge guy. One thing I think is worth mentioning with him is that when he does play more of that off ball like or more the edge rusher, he has had a lot of success there, but he kind of switches between that linebacker and off ball. So it's hard. Georgia's a hard place to really judge these guys. You know, I'll jump into another guy while we're on that topic. There's another guy from Georgia who is another really tough one to judge, and
Hmm.
that's Michael Williams. He's another guy that people love, but
Another tweener. Yeah.
yeah, as a tweener, he's more of a D line edge guy, and he plays there's a lot of straight D line, but he's this guy's another freak athlete, 6'5", 265 pounds with a 34 plus inch arms, and he's expected to run in the high 4.5s, low 4.6s, which is really good for his size. You know, one thing that's I think worth pointing out with Michael Williams is and granted they had some injuries, they had some people sitting out. It's not totally fair to judge this, but the only position I can remember Michael Williams really playing full edge was when they played for Florida State in the bowl game, and he took over when they played him full time at edge there. He had 6 pressures, 2 sacks. He had a 93.5 PFF grade, a 93.4 pass rush grade. He really took over that game. And they were expecting him to play edge for him this year. They were talking about it, and then all of a sudden, Jalen Walker came onto the scene, and suddenly this guy demanded to get some of those edge reps, and it kind of got split a little bit more. And Michael Williams found himself, seeing a little bit more of those D line reps again. So,
It's the way
Georgia's so weird.
it's the way Kirby utilizes his defensive
Hmm.
players. Nobody gets to showcase one skill. He slides them around the line. He uses them in different packages. These guys kind of consistently underperform statistically what you think they could do while playing at Georgia, but they showcase their athletic ability. And there's a little bit of leap of faith when you take these guys, all of them. You think back to it, right? Other than Jalen Carter, who was like a slam dunk in every way, all these guys are a leap of faith. Trayvon Walker is the prototype DK put in the chat, for a guy like Michael Williams. Trayvon Walker ended up going one overall after blowing up the combine. Dan Jeremiah was talking about it well before the combine, saying, "Watch out for Trayvon Walker." NFL teams value guys like this, right? The testing freaks who they think can project at the next level. I would say Trayvon Walker has not yet fulfilled the value of the number one overall pick. They should have probably taken Aiden Hutchinson there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's if you watch, but watch him carefully. He's becoming a better football player year after year. He's becoming a very good edge rusher. So teams will bank on the traits here. So I think Mikael Williams will fall into that. Now, is he going to go one overall? No, but could he go top 10? Yeah. I think that he potentially could find his way into the top 10. I wouldn't take him in the top 10. There's not enough on tape for me to feel comfortable doing that. But I think he's going to blow up the combine. I think he's going to run like a 4.5 something. He's going to
Mm-hmm.
test a lot like Trayvon Walker. I think he's going
Yeah.
to test very similar to him.
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, we'll see. I think he's a guy who's clearly liked more by the NFL community than a lot of the NFL Twitter and like that type of community. A lot of the fans see him, and
Yeah.
Michael Williams is one of those guys, and we've seen those guys in the past. What sometimes Twitter is right, sometimes they're wrong with how we all view him over there. Another guy I want to point out as more of that tweener defensive line edge, a guy that we talked about last week in Landon Jackson. So he's a guy who began his career at LSU and then transferred to Arkansas. 6'6", 281 pounds. He topped out at 20.4 miles per hour last offseason. Broad jump 10 feet 2 inches, and vertical jumped 34 inches. So another guy who's a really explosive player. A lot of strength.
Yeah. And another guy we just reviewed in this episode, David Walker, is also on the freak list. He,
Mm-hmm.
came in at just over 6 feet tall, 267 pounds, but he had a recorded 40-yard time last year of 4.59 seconds to go with a vertical jump of 36 inches and a 385-pound power clean. That all checks out on tape, by the way. He's extremely explosive, he's quick, and he's strong. Again, we talk about how he may not be a 3-down edge rusher right away in the NFL, but at minimum, we can see him being a disruptive force as a rotational pass rusher. So I think he's going to test well. He may raise his stock, right? That's what happens to guys like this when they test well. Their stock goes up. I don't know if we're
Yeah,
missing anybody else here.
there's a couple guys here. I think the big one we haven't mentioned so far is let's see, it was
Well, there's one big one. There's definitely one left.
there's
Number
there's
40. Yeah.
there's actually a few of them left still.
All right, go for him.
So let's see. We got James Pierce. We didn't talk about. That wasn't the one I was
Yeah.
going to say, but miss him. 6'5", 243 pounds. Vols coaches have told him he's a legit 4.4 caliber guy. That's a guy who has a lot of speed on tape, and is a guy who is going to test probably very, very well. There's some red flags that are popping up with him recently. People are talking about, so we'll see how he interviews, but he's another guy who could test really well.
He's apparently a bit of a problem
Mm-hmm.
that we're hearing. I mean, I hate to jump to conclusions from these reports in the pre-draft process, but that's the story, right? That there's some issues in terms of him in the locker room. We'll see how that affects him.
Yep. Another guy we talked about last week, Princely, Uman something like that. I forgot. I can't. I have to learn. We're probably going to draft him because you always kind of have
Because
to
you can't
learn that
pronounce his
Bruce
name.
Edge name once in a while. The Kunukas of the world, and if you figure it out. Yeah. So, 6'4", 255 pounds. Led team with 10.5 sacks, 13.5 tackles for loss. He's expected to run in the 4.5s, and they said his 10-yard split should be blazing. So, another guy to watch out for. The guy that I said that we haven't talked about yet, what I really want to talk about is Mike Green. Mike Green is a guy who could really raise his stock because his tape is phenomenal, and if he can match that with some crazy testing, I think people might fall in love with this guy. 6'3", 251 pounds. He showed off his explosiveness at the Senior Bowl. He was bull rushing people, took down Josh Connerly, put him on his back. In last offseason, he ran a 4.7 40-yard dash. Um, this is another guy who we'll see how he tests, but the explosiveness shows up on tape for sure.
Let me give you a guy who's a DT, but he's not. He
Okay.
could be an edge. Number 40 on the freak list here. A guy I mean, I love this guy. I know DKit loves this guy. Darius Alexander from Toledo.
Mm-hmm.
He's listed as defensive tackle, but I mean, he can play with his hand in the dirt as a D end. And he's somebody to look out for. 6'4", 304, bench 400 pounds. It's 20 miles per hour on GPS at 304 pounds and vertical 30 inches. And this year was productive with 40 tackles, 7.5 tackles for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and a 58-yard pick six. You mentioned this a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but but I think it's worth mentioning him as an edge rusher. Like
Mm-hmm.
that. Might be a guy who qualifies as an edge at the NFL level.
Yep. And then there's one other guy we can mention for edge, but you can also see him as linebacker. So why don't you read some of this linebacker, what to look
Yeah,
for there, and I'll
yeah.
lead off.
I
Lead
know
off.
exactly who you're getting at because
Yeah,
that's the nature. This class, this is the tweener class, man.
it
There's a
really
lot of
is.
these guys.
Yeah.
You're seeing them, they're crossovers, and maybe that's just the
Mhm.
way athletes are being, developed now. But let's go into off-ball linebacker. Off-ball linebacker, if you think about their role, there are a lot of different roles depending on what defense you're in. Fundamentally, the main job is to tackle well, come downhill, tackle well, have gap responsibilities, take away the run game. But they're also charged with coverage. They're also charged with diagnosing the defense, diagnosing the offense. Many of them are asked to be the green dot. So here's the thing that actually matter in terms of predictive success: height. Height has mattered a lot over the years. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're not tall, you're not going to be good, but height has translated to success at off-ball linebacker. So has arm length, bench press, broad jump, and then sort of an equal distribution of testing really along the rest of them. Arm, bench, 10-yard split, broad jump, vertical, three cone shuttle. Everything matters. A little height mattered a lot. Weight didn't matter. So you know, go figure. But it depends on how you're used. So I think it's a more cerebral position than people give it credit for. But why don't you go into the guys who are kind of linebackers slash other?
Yeah, so I mean, you went over one already with Jalen Walker, but there's another SEC guy here, Jihad Campbell from Alabama, and he's a guy who you're seeing really high up on these lists between Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah. He's 20 years old, and he was the best player on Alabama's defense this year. He piled up 117 tackles this year to go with 11.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. Not nearly like what Will Campbell did, but it reminds me a little bit of Will Campbell. Will Campbell was a guy who kind of like racked up everything. He was all over the field, and that's kind of that Alabama defense. 6'3", 245 pounds. He's expected to run the 40 and the 4.4s, and he's supposed to excel in everything. Jihad Campbell's definitely a guy I want to watch more tape on. I haven't really given him a full dive. I haven't dove into him fully yet, but he is a really really interesting player who I think at one point seemed like, oh, this guy might get slept on a little bit, but that doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
He's another interesting guy. Like I think that's his pass rush chops are part of why he's being discussed so high in this class.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see a lot of off-ball linebackers go where he's being projected. Um, is there anybody else in the linebacker crew you want to go through?
Yeah, there's a couple. Cody Lindenberg from Minnesota.
Hmm.
Um, he finished with a team best 94 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 6 passes broken up with 1 interception. Good size, 6'3", 240 pounds, hit 21.46 miles per hour. He ran a 4.0 pro shuttle time last offseason. The last time an NFL prospect went that fast in Indy was shout out West Virginia. David Long did it with a 3.97. Lindenberg, broad jump 10 feet 0 inches, broad jump 36 inches, 10-yard split of 151. And then I have one more guy. I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
Nope.
All right. Last guy, Eugene Asante from Auburn. He was a team captain with 47 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 6'1, 219 pounds. He's a smaller guy. He's a younger brother of former NFL safety Larry Asante. He's an explosive and strong player. Last off season, he squatted 635 pounds, bench 405 pounds, and he clocked in at a 4.48 40-yard dash, the max velocity of 22 miles per hour.
All right.
Rad brought up a good point. Barrett Carter did not get put on this list, but he is a guy who I expect to test very well for out of Clemson.
Test well, but didn't make the freak list, if I
Yes, correct.
recall. And I think we're
Mhm.
going by the freak list because it's a good way to review some of these guys as you go into the combine.
Yeah, and we have
All
some
right,
real numbers on him and whatnot.
cornerbacks. So we our last two positions are DBs. So let's start with cornerback. The most predictive factor for cornerback success at the NFL is the 10-yard split. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Followed by weight. And we've learned this lesson. Weight matters at the cornerback position, followed by the vertical. I think that makes sense. And then the 40 and height. All of those to me make a lot of sense, but the most impactful is 10, followed by weight and vertical, and everything's a little bit less. So um, I think that if you really think about this, Emmanuel Forbes, you know, underwhelming so far, got cut by the Commanders after being a first round pick. There's a guy in this class who scares the bejesus out of me because of his weight. People love him, but I don't want to take him, and that's Kobe Bryant
Mhm.
from Kansas. He's I think 165 pounds, dripping wet. This guy. Uh, so
I
I have concerns about like weight when it comes to trying to play the boundary in the NFL.
Yeah, I love his game, man, but yeah, I'm not a big bet on outliers guy.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we go through the rest of these guys here?
So yeah, I mean, I'll start out with one. We've already talked about him. I don't want to go too much into it because Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
We talked about a wide receiver, 185 pounds. I'll just add some stuff I didn't mention last time. I'll remind you, supposed to run sub 4.4, which is pretty crazy, 40-inch vertical. But they had some stuff here about his defense. On a touchdown saving tackle against TCU, he had a 21.2 miles per hour in game. That was in the 81st snap of the game in near 100-degree weather in Texas. Pretty crazy. He also displayed a closing speed of 6.9 yards per second in his diving red zone interception midway through the third quarter. That 6.9 yards per second was the second fastest time on nearly 8,400 defensive backs in the real analytics database. So this guy is a guy who can close. I think that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, what to look for. Probably a guy who's going to do really well in the 10-yard split and whatnot. The other guy to mention, another guy who I think people are sleeping on a little bit at this point, but still is a fantastic player, still a blue
Prospect
chip.
fatigue.
Yeah, it really is.
It's prospect fatigue.
Still a blue chip player for me, and that's Will Johnson. He was the offensive MVP of the 2023 national championship. He missed a lot of last season to injury, but 6'2", 202 pounds. He's a complete package. He's got that, Patrick Surtain like prototype to him. And Michigan, they have a good program there, and they might fudge some numbers, but they have some good stuff. Michigan's reactive plyo stairs testing that we've talked about in the past. He had
Hmm.
2.27 seconds. He did the 3-cone again. I think those 3 cones are a little bit close together, but 6.57, pretty insane numbers. Again, to put that into perspective, let's see, the best one that 6.57 actually is more common than some of the other numbers they've thrown out before. That would be a 98th percentile. So at least it's not, it's not a record. Like we've seen in the past there, what they've claimed. We'll see if he does it. Michigan players in the past haven't. But 20-yard shuttle is 405, which would have been the third best 2 years in Indianapolis, and his broad jump was 10 feet 8 inches and a half. So really, really good athlete.
Yeah. And his weight, like this again, 202 pounds, 6'2", 202. physically imposing cornerback, and I do think that matters. So
Hmm.
quick, agile, athletic, big, strong. I mean, Will Johnson. I until recently thought there's no way this guy's falling out of the top 10. I don't know now. I've seen too many, mocks from guys like Jeremiah have him in like the top 20, but not the top 10. It's mind-boggling to me.
If he falls to the Dallas Cowboys, I'm gonna be so fucking mad.
They would take him too.
Yep, he would be such a good
I
fit
mean,
there.
if you believe the mocks, he's falling to and potentially past the Cowboys, you know?
Yeah,
But like I mean, I don't know. I don't see how he's not a top 10 pick in this class, but whatever. Like
yeah.
you can't understand some of this stuff. All right.
Um, our guy
Who else are we going through?
authentic, our guy
Yeah.
authentic threw out a name. Quincy Riley's the guy to watch. He's a really good athlete. He should test well, and he's a guy who dealt with an ankle injury this year. So it'd be good of him to go out there and show that he has that athleticism after kind of some down tapes this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to watch a lot of these guys,
Hmm.
for the speed element. But I would keep in mind like the weight. It's not everything, but it matters. So just be wary of it, and at least at minimum, edge it into your price that you pay for some of these players. Say, like I'm a little gun shy after the whole Emmanuel Forbes thing. I think I'm okay with taking an undersized cornerback, but later, you know,
Yeah,
way later. So.
yeah. So next is safety. You want to give us some thoughts there about what to look
Yes.
for?
So safety, much like quarterback, is really viewed as a cerebral position.
Hmm.
It's more up here than it is anywhere else, but there are things that matter, right? It depends on which alignment you're playing and what your exact role is. But here are the factors that actually predict success. 40 time. This is one of the few positions where 40 time, followed closely by 10-yard split, are big predictors of NFL success, as are shuttle time, vertical, three cone, and broad. So basically, speed and explosiveness. Height and weight don't seem to matter as much. Arm length doesn't matter. That kind of makes sense. Bench press doesn't matter. Now we've seen great players at the safety position do absolutely terrible in the 40 time, right? Xavier
Hmm.
McKinney ran a terrible 40. Kyle Hamilton ran a terrible 40.
Ed Reed.
Ed Reed ran a terrible 40. Now, some of these guys can't run in a straight line. Like, I mean, that's the
Hmm.
thing with safeties. I guess they're so used to going zigzag, they cannot run in a straight line, so they can't do the 40 right. But just in general, it does seem to predict for a better outcome if a guy can run well. So speed does matter to some extent at the safety's position, as does agility and vertical. But again, I think all of these, when you add them up, pale in comparison to what's up here for a safety.
Agreed. But with that in mind, two freaks to keep in mind. One guy we've already covered, Nick Manowari, from South Carolina. This
Number
guy,
one.
yeah, he's number one on this list. He was number 11 on the overall freak list. He is a complete and total freak. I mean, this guy is supposed to broad jump 11 feet 4 inches, vertical jump 42 inches. He bench rep 225 24 times, squats 565, does this all at 6'3, 220 pounds. And apparently he ran a 4.35 last week. So, I mean, this is a guy who's going to he's going to be the talk of Indy. Like, there's a few of these guys we're going to talk about, and this guy is one of them who really will be the talk of Indy this week.
Yeah. Um, First round buzz for Nick Emanwari. I don't know if he makes it in the first round, but certainly a lot of first round buzz for him. Um, Again, I don't like taking safeties that high. And if I do, we talked about this in our safety episode. If I'm taking a safety at like first roundish, I need somebody who does more than just play safety. I need a
Mm-hmm.
nickel, a guy who can be essentially an extra cornerback on the field.
Yeah.
The Brian Branches, the Dax Hills, you know, the Malachi Starks, those guys are the ones who carry that kind of value to me. But Emanwari is getting a lot of buzz. The
Mm-hmm.
other guy's a fun one to go over.
Yeah, he is a fun guy. We've talked about him in the past. Brother of Austin Eckler, Wyatt Eckler. 5'11", 212 pounds out of Wyoming. He had 46 tackles this last year. Super explosive, just like his brother. And he's probably going to top what his brother did. His brother jumped 40 and a half inches of the 40. Why is he supposed to do 42 and a half? And he's supposed to have a 10-7 broad jump. And just to remind people, we talked about Wyatt when we did a Freak List episode. Him and Austin, they look exactly alike. Look at that guy. They look exactly alike. Look at
Just like
that
Austin
head.
Eckler.
That's insane. It's so
Yeah.
funny that those guys are brothers.
Did we find a picture of their mom? It's hilarious.
Wait, oh yeah, here it is. I have it.
Yeah, there's the family right there.
There's the family.
And
Wyatt
that's
Austin.
Wyatt with hair on the
Yeah,
right and Austin
yeah.
Eckler on the left, and that's their mom. Yeah. So, but Wyatt is
And
a
more
he's
athletic than Austin.
yeah, he's a better athlete. It's incredible. 40.5 inch vertical.
Mhm.
That's like that was Austin. 42.5 inch for Wyatt. 10-7 broad jump. That's nuts. So he's going to be a fun one to watch playing DB. I really haven't watched his tape. I don't know if he's any good or not, but he's going to be an athlete and fun to watch. I think that's everybody, right? Did
Yeah,
we get
man.
every
That was
player?
over 40 players we talked about there.
We just did 40 reviews in like an hour and a half for you guys.
Yeah.
So
So, that'll be a fun one. Keep it in mind when you're watching, you're sitting back and just watching the underwear Olympics this weekend.
we'll put the links to these articles in the thread, like in the video. But again, it's cool to get enamored by the overall testing stuff and the RAS scores. You're going to see Ken Lee Platt post his RAS scores, the
Yep.
math bomb. It's going to be fun to watch. But just remember that not every metric and every testing stat matters that much for every player. Remember what metrics matter for each individual position in the setting of understanding what athletic testing does for their valuation. Just look at those things, and obviously this stuff all pales in comparison to actual tape data. There's years of it on these kids, but I view the combine overall, Monty, as just confirmation of what you see on tape, right? If you think a guy
Mhm.
is a really good athlete and hasn't been borne out in testing, and then he tests really well, and you're like, all right, he's a good football player, good athlete. I feel good. If you watch a guy who you're like, I'm not sure this guy's all that fast, I'm not sure he's all that good, and then he can't test right, confirmation, right? I view it more like that. I typically don't go into the combine thinking, oh my God, look at that guy's RAS score. I'm going to bump him up 2 rounds. That's not how I look at it.
No, but I will say, if a guy tests way better than I expected, I want to go back and look at him. And I'll also say, we do our best to try to get through as many prospects as we can, but there's 300 plus guys in this draft. Sometimes, especially for these smaller guys, it's like, oh, this guy's a freak. I got to watch
Mhm.
tape on this guy. It brings him to your attention to make sure that you watch a few games on him.
Exactly. All right. I think that's it. We're going to close it out. That's enough. I'm tired.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
that's a lot to go through, but we appreciate you guys have been hanging out with us the whole time. It's a long ass episode. Combine week is upon us. Remember, tomorrow morning at 10:20, Joe Shane speaks and gets to lie to you one more time. Make
Yeah.
sure to tune in and listen to the lies. And after that, the fun should start with the interviews, the medicals. For those who don't know, the combine is a pretty cool place. Like they have a whole setup in Indianapolis where the medicals are done on site with MRIs and CT scanners and X-rays, which are directly linked through fiber optics to Indiana University, and they go ahead and actually read their films in real time and give real time feedback to the NFL teams. Like, oh, this guy's MRI shows this, guy shows that. So it's an interesting experience. It's if you have the time, tune in and watch it. But there's more than just the testing. There's medicals, interviews, the whole bit. So it's a process. By the end of this week, we're going to start to formulate the beginnings of real big boards. I think
Mhm.
that's after the combine. I think you can sit down and say, all right, I've reviewed a bunch of players. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to look at their athletic testing, add it to all the other data. And that's what we're going to be working on. We're going to be working on our top 100 board. So at least our
Yep.
top 50. But I think we're going to have
Mhm.
to do a top 100 most likely. So
Yep. We can at
with
least
that,
start with the top 50.
yep. Next week we'll try to be back, and we're gonna do two more players. Who are we doing again? The O linemen, right?
Yep. Membu and Charles Grant.
Membu and Charles Grant next week, and some post Senior Bowl stuff, and if there's anything else we can add in the mix, we'll throw it in. Otherwise, thank you guys for being here as always. Remember to like if you haven't liked yet, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. You can reach us at He's a Giant Pod on Twitter. You can find me at Queens_guy. You can find Monty at MONTECRI5TO. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Go Giants.
Go Giants.